Welcome to All Things Esoteric Podcast. Today is February 5th, 2025. My name is Cathleen, and I'm here with Anthony this evening. Good evening, Anthony.
Hey, Kate.
Hey. We are going to be looking at episode 26, Zero, the Fool card of the Tarot. So with that, what I would want to do here quick is first just open up with some significant astrological stuff that's going on in the sky so that you can just get an idea of what to expect depending on where these energies are within your own chart. So just give me a minute here. Let me get it pulled up. So how have you been, Anthony, while I'm pulling this up?
I've been okay. Been off mic for a long time. Gotta drink more of this beer.
Well, we've been busy. What's that?
Been off mic for a while.
We have been off mic for a while. There's ample reason for that. But hey, thanks to our 55 subscribers who follow us, you die-hardcore fans, you. Appreciate you. And I don't know if you guys, all of you know who's ever listening to this, that's getting this. Anthony and I don't live in the same area. So if we step on each other while we're talking a little bit, we apologize because sometimes I don't know he's going to say something. I don't have the facial expression. We're not on video. We're only on record because of my bandwidth out where I'm at isn't the best. So we just welcome you and we thank you for joining us. And I want to talk about the outer planets moving from earth and water elements to air and fire. And this is occurring all throughout 2025. It's super important to understand the outer planets have these longer transits around the zodiacal wheel. Uranus has 84 that it takes to go around the wheel, Neptune 164, and Pluto 248. So consequently, what happens there is these longer themes and longer transits tend to change cultural and societal ways of life, which greatly affects each one of us. So depending on what aspects are going on and what house they're traveling through and where you live and how this is hitting your chart is where you'll see some of the changes that will be going through. And I just want to read them off, not going into these, but I think it's important to know them. So if you're taking notes, you might want to write these down. Also, it's important to note the nodes of fate, which are the North Node or Rahu, or the South Node and K2, commonly called, have shifted axes as well. And I have now gone from Aries and Libra to Pisces and Virgo. So what's that all about? I'll leave that up to you to go in there deeper and dig. But the nodes shift every 18 months. They do go into retrograde, and they're not planets. They're mathematical points on the chart that astronomers use to map the sky. And so we have Uranus that's going to be shifting signs. And let me say this too. I think this is why people are calling this time such a time of change and transition. And you're hearing a lot of, we have two pathways. And I recently wrote on this on my Archetype channel on Facebook. I opened up just a pitch for that as I'm doing more astrology, more deeper astrology, and also my YouTube channel. But I talk about how it seems like where before we had worlds colliding, now it's kind of like we have each one's choosing their path because we're realizing oil and water doesn't mix. And there's this separating in several dimensions, different ways that you can go with this. And they're saying timelines are splitting, depending on who you listen to. And other people are equating this all back to all the weather abnormalities we're having. So there's a lot going on with the shifting of these planets because what they do is they move into different frequencies because they're in a different part of the sky, which has different energetic and archetype signatures known for thousands of years to come down and affect humanity. And this isn't about proving astrology. It has been proven many, many times over to show significant events. And then when you look at the chart, it tells the story of what transgressed. So it happens too many times for it to be random. But I'll leave that up to you. This isn't what that's about. So we have the following taking place in the great year of change. We have Saturn entering Aries on May 24th, 2025. It'll remain there until September 1st. I want to bring Saturn in because Saturn also is a planet before Uranus, and it takes 29 and a half years to go around. And so wherever it goes, it stays a while as well. With Saturn moving out of Pisces into Aries, we're moving from an energy that was not yang in its expression. It wasn't cardinal. It wasn't like Aries where it was ruled by fire and it wanted to move out. Here it had been ruled by Pisces, which is water, and the highest water. So where we had a more introspective looking in and wanting to go up to the highest and look at all things high, all things spiritual, all beliefs, all ways of being. Like we've had a lot of time to look at that. Now we're having a more close look at how can I use my own first house. Aries rules the first house. Self-awareness, my personality, the way I move my body around the chart, Aries, my cardinal fire. I'm ruled by Mars if I'm Aries. That's our visceral power. That's how we move out. How am I going to now, inside of Saturn, discipline it so that it can become something? And Saturn in Aries isn't the easiest energy because cardinal energy wants to go out and Saturn wants to restrict. Aries energy wants to go out and Saturn wants to set boundaries so that it can build because it rules Capricorn and Aquarius. So that's going to happen until September 1st. Then it's going to go retrograde and come back, but it'll go forward again where it'll remain for two and a half years. Then we have Jupiter that's going to enter Cancer in June 2025. That's important to note for all Cancers and the opposite sign. We always look at polarity Capricorn. So Jupiter, great benefit wherever Jupiter shows up. It enlarges that house, that position where it's hitting, where it wants to lend great fortune and favor and blessings and benefits to you. It is the most blessed planet. It is the largest planet. And I just happened to come across, who's that dude, that astronomy dude? Neil Graciao or something like that.
Neil deGrasse.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
anyway, he said that somebody asked him a question. He's like, well, why don't we ever just fly right through Jupiter? It's just all gas, right? And he's like, yeah, you could, but then you would be impacted by what's going on. And I don't remember all that he said, but I don't know why I didn't remember that, but I did not realize
Gravity
you can
on
actually
Jupiter.
go through it, like through the planet, which is crazy to think. It's not solid in any way, right?
Yeah, it is a gas giant. It
Right.
might be small material.
I wonder if we'll ever.
An astronomer, but definitely the issue with flying through Jupiter would be that the gravity of Jupiter is crazy. It would be very hard to go back out.
Right. We have to remember what Saturn rules with it going in Aries, and Saturn is concerned with Earth, ruling Capricorn, of course, but it also rules Aquarius. And with fire and Aquarius and air, we now have a lot of technology coming out, and a very independent spirit of Aries is very independent spirit. It is the forerunner. It is the go-getter. It initiates, it leads, it's cardinal. So we're going to see, I think, people really start looking at their creativity in a whole new way in reference to fire, which is your creativity and your intuitive expressions, of course. And I think that that's something going to be on display big time, because Aries is cardinal, it's spring, and it's seen, so to speak, because it comes up through the earth, right? That is the season that rules Aries, is spring. So that's important to remember. Okay, then we have Uranus, which enters Gemini on July 7th. Now, Uranus has been in Taurus for 7 years, 6.5 years. So we have to remember, well, what was Taurus doing Uranus doing in Taurus? Go back and listen to our episodes. We've had a progression of a story of what's been going on, because when we have these changes, we're going from fixed Taurus now to a change of air in Gemini. These are completely different ways of operating Uranus. And what is Uranus? Uranus is sudden change. It is the higher octave of Mercury. It's not only sudden change, it's fast, quick, electric, shocking, kind of like without notice change. It's like the wrecking ball. It just plows through, or it doesn't have really, it's not a warm situation in Gemini. It's not concerned with the heart or the emotional part of things here. It's just, it very much reminds me of just being very blunt here, and like things coming out of the mouths of people, and we'll be like, oh my God. And this is going to go on for 7 years. This is air energy, and Gemini rules the third house of the zodiac, which is our communication, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, who also rules Virgo. But in Gemini, it's younger, mercurial, chatty, fast, quick, engaging, lighthearted, bottom of the chart 1 through 6 stuff. It's not the higher, not that it can't go out there. I'm not saying that at all, but Gemini is more concerned with daily communication. So there's going to be a lot of, with Aries rising up and Gemini speaking these sudden events and sudden things coming out. It's really going to be something to behold. That's for 7 years that will take place. There'll also be retrogrades, but for 7 years we're having a change of Uranus. It's coming up in July. After that, we have Neptune. It enters Aries on March 30th, so that's coming up very quickly, and it's going to be there for 14 years. So Neptune in Aries, we have another planet moving into fire, and this is energy that moves out, just like I said, just like Saturn is doing. So we've had Neptune and Saturn in this Piscean conversation for quite a while, really bringing in lessons. So wherever that hits your chart might not have been the easiest energy. With Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, before it hit Aries, it was dealing with, okay, what do you believe in? And let's just put some structure around it so you can talk about it. And let's make it practical. Saturn wants to bring it down, and Neptune wants to go out to the highest of the high. So there was a lot of people coming into their own belief systems and solidifying them, or having some kind of understanding about their long-term future high hopes, Neptune goals. And that definitely has taken place for a lot of people. And then the last planet was Pluto, which of course went into Aquarius last November, and it is going to be in Aquarius for, depending on, if you look at the slow ingress, which some people count, and then it being in a retrograde position, and then the slow ingress out of retrograde, and then going completely forward, it's about 22 years. So what does it mean to have air and fire? We have a lot of energy that is picking up steam, and it's going to go fast, super fast. And so my word to you is to stay grounded, my friends. Stay grounded. We had a lunar node shift and change, and the nodes, I'm not going to go into those, and it's a mathematical point. And that point shifts and changes, and astronomers use it to point other maps in the sky, and they're tied to fate, karma, what you are here to look at and grow into and master and achieve, and in that mastering, balance and not be too out of control, and what you're meant to release, integrate from the last life, and use in a more probably better way, if not get rid of it altogether. The north node is the dragon's head, and the south node is the dragon's tail. So in essence, what you're eating, what you're going after, and what you're excreting. So those nodes shift every 18 months, and those are shifting, and we have the nodes entering Virgo and Pisces, and that happened on January 11th. So we're also going to have a new series of eclipses coming up with the nodes changing and planets moving into air and fire. This is all happening at the same time within the year. We also have that crazy Mars situation in Cancer. And it ends up being that Mars's transit will be 7 months when it's all said and done, because of retrogrades back into, it's in Cancer, but it went into Leo, went back into Cancer. And so finally, when it moves forward and moves out, it will be a 7-month cycle. So Cancers, I think, had that happen because Pluto had been in Capricorn before it went into Aquarius. And the opposite sign of Capricorn is Cancer, of course. And so she was finishing up as well some things, and Mars is giving her that extra push. And incidentally, I'm finishing my program of school, and I have Mars in the 9th house of higher education, and that's where it's transiting, meaning that's where my transit is. So that's really helping me be like, okay, I needed that energy there. I needed to get fired up because that is my house. That's Cancer, the 9th. And I needed to really put forth the last, few months of this program and just be done with it after 5 years. So Venus also retrogrades in Aries. So another planet moving into fire, and Pisces goes into water too in March and April of 2025. So a lot going on. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that's all I have on the astrology.
Oh, the astrology is all you. That was wonderful.
So yeah, hey guys, just pull your transits on the outer 3 planets. That's really important to know. You don't got to look at it every day, but if you know that, oh hey, Uranus is going to be going through my 5th house for 7 years, that might be important to know, because whatever else you have in that house is going to be hit by that Uranus, so to speak, or be in an aspect to it in one way, shape, form, or another. So it just depends on what's there and if it gets along, if it's in detriment. But wherever Uranus is shock and awe, which leads us right into the Fool card. Let's go ahead and open that up. And I do want to say it's kind of cool, numerology-wise, that today's date, 2/5/2025, reduces to a 7, and 7 is the Chariot, and that is my card in the Tarot, and we'll be talking about the Tarot. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Very cool.
We're going to talk real quick before we get into the Tarot. Just a little bit of a background. I'm going to just give really a quick few sentences, and then Anthony is going to share what he has on the background on the Tarot. But the Tarot is a system of symbolic cards used for divination, spiritual exploration, and self-reflection. Its origins are rooted in Renaissance Europe, but it has evolved over centuries become a powerful tool for understanding human experience and universal archetypes. And we'll be going over the history of the tarot, the structure of the deck, the major arcana symbolism. We're going to touch base on that before we get into the Fool, and then we will dive into the Fool. Okay, with that, you got it. Turn it over to you.
Okay, we'll start on the structure of the deck. And with that, I would like to start with a quote from Dion Fortune, the author of The Mystical Kabbalah. Astrology, tarot, and the Holy Kabbalah are not three separate systems of divination, but three aspects of one and the same system. And I would like everyone to always remember that, because it might get a little confusing if you don't. So, the tarot deck is based on the Kabbalistic tree of life. There are actually four trees in one. There is one separate tree for each element, which gives us our four suits. The ace through 10 of each suit represent the 10 spheres of the tree on the tree of life. The three of swords represents the sphere of Binah in the world of air, because Binah is the third sphere. Furthermore, the Golden Dawn has attributed to each number card a planet in a zodiac sign. So the three of swords represents Saturn in Libra within Binah, within the world of air. The major arcana represents 22 paths on the tree. The 22 paths on the tree and the 22 major arcana both represent the 12 zodiac signs plus the 7 planets plus the 3 Hebrew mother letters, which represent fire, water, and air. And of course, that all comes out to 22. Every major arcana also has a Hebrew letter associated with them that brings its own mystical symbolism. 22 major arcana, 22 Hebrew letters. Right? Court card figures represent the 4 elements with varying associations across decks. For example, the Princess of Swords represents the earth of air. Understanding these associations is key to understanding the meaning of the cards. And that is my summary.
Okay. Thank you. That's well done. It's pretty concise. The only thing that I would add is there are 78 cards. I think you talked about the two main categories, major arcana and minor arcana. And the major arcana, those 22 cards, those are significant lessons, significant archetypes, and universal themes. And they're metaphors for our soul's path through life, self-discovery, and enlightenment. So there, if you get a major arcana card, those are taken a little bit more seriously than if you get what's called the minor arcana, 56 cards. Like he said, divided into 4 suits. Each suit contains 14 cards, 10 numbered cards, and 4 court cards. The page, the knight, the queen, and the king, depending on the deck. And what is it in the Thoth deck?
It is the knights, the queen, the prince, and princess. And we'll explain why there's no king. The king is called the knight in a little bit.
The knights. Okay, so start it from lower to higher.
The princess, prince, queen, knight.
And the knight. Okay, yeah, that's totally different. The traditional Smith Waite, which a lot of decks are structured upon. We have to understand, though, and we're going to go into this, like the history of the tarot for just a moment, because you have to do that before you even get into the Fool, lay just a little bit groundwork. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but Anthony's going to shed some light on the Golden Dawn and when the decks were made, and I'm going to do that too. And that's really going to show how, there were different approaches to the tarot. There isn't one hard fast way, is what I'm trying to say. Would you agree with that, Anthony?
Yes and no. I would say even though the decks are different, there are differences between the decks. They are still trying to express the same ideas, the same symbolism. It's just that different authors of different decks have a slightly different philosophy, a slightly different idea of the best way to
Right.
represent these archetypes. So I would say the differences are really superficial.
Yeah, and I like the differences. I do like all the different types of decks.
Yeah,
I have
me too. I
some
mean,
really
that's the
cool
reason.
oracle cards. I just love using them. They vibe with me, they connect with me, they literally speak to me. It's me speaking to me, of course. We know that it's all subconscious work, which is why you change, because it addresses the psychology of a person. So you've heard, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. There's a lot to that because here on this planet, the eyes are eye gates and they bring in more than just sight. We have to remember that. That's for another time. Also, the minor arcana, the 56 pip cards are often called. These reflect more everyday events, challenges, and personal interactions. Like if the major themes are, I had to go to see the doctor, and the doctor is the major arcana card or the archetype, then how you got there, when you got there, why you got there, what caused you to be there. All that is all the other cards telling your story, which is pretty cool. That's just an example. And then I have all the themes and symbolism for each card, but I'm not going to go into that. We'll just go into them one at a time, right, as we do this series. So we're starting with the Fool. But before we do that, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, that was it on the structure of the deck.
On the structure of the deck, yes. I would say on the core themes of the tarot, I have three, and it's self-discovery, universal archetypes, and balance of opposites. And the major arcana reflects the stages of personal and spiritual growth. Universal archetypes, each card embodies experiences and lessons shared across from cultures and times. And I love that. I love that it can fit in any culture. You see this, and we're going to talk about that as the Fool shows up, right? And then the tarot explores dualities like light and dark, inner and outer, masculine and feminine. Serves as both a mirror of the self and a roadmap for life's journey, offering guidance, insight, and a deeper connection to universal truths. And that really is the whole kicker right there, I think, is it's universal truths. And what do we mean by universal truths? It's all the stuff that I think was suppressed and kept hidden. The real truths, that which we should know, but we were unplugged from, so to speak. What do you think?
I would agree.
All right. Well, as I'm sharing this, Anthony, you probably know stuff. Let me know what your experience has been, what you've come across, because I know you've studied and looked at it. I know the tarot has drawn you like it's drawn me. That's how we met, right?
Yeah.
Early origins, 15th century, transformation into divination, the 18th century, and then the 19th and 20th centuries. So, from what I found, these cards were first created in the 1400s in Italy as a card game called Tarocchi, Tarocchi, and early decks were hand painted and used primarily for entertainment among the nobility. And there is a Visconti Sforza Tarot. It's one of the oldest surviving decks, and I think it's in New York, and I want to go see it. But it's hand painted. I guess it's
What was
beautiful.
the name again? You kind of cut out for a second.
Visconti, the early decks. And then somewhere along the line, and there's a lot of information here, and comment below what you know, anyone who wants to, and be great to hear what you know about what happened from the 15th century to the 18th century. Because in there, tarot cards began to be used for occult and divinatory purposes,
This would be a
particularly in
good
France.
thing to jump in before we move on. The earliest deck that I have heard of, when I just pulled up, I didn't plan for this, I just pulled up the Wikipedia page real quick. I'm just going to read from it. The Sola Busca Tarot is the earliest completely extant example of a 78 card tarot deck. It is also the earliest tarot deck in which all the plain suit cards are illustrated. And it is also the earliest tarot deck in which the trump card illustrations deviate from the classic tarot iconography. Unlike the earlier Visconti Sforza tarot decks, the cards of the Sola Busca are numbered. The trump cards have Roman numerals, while the pip of the plain suits have Arabic numerals. The deck was created by an unknown artist and engraved onto metal in the late 15th century. A single, complete hand-painted deck is known to exist, along with 35 uncolored cards held by various museums. The deck is notable not only for its age, but also for the quality of its artwork, which is characterized by expressive figurines engraved with precise contours and shading. Various theories have been suggested about who created the deck, but its authorship remains uncertain. And let me see, there's no controversy section in here. So there is a bit of a controversy with this deck because, as you mentioned before, it was associated tarot early on with royalty, and there's a few cards in this deck that people described as homosexual acts and also Saturn worship, which was very taboo in that time.
I had not heard of the deck before the deck, so thank you. What year was that the first Visconti deck was made before the Sforza?
It just
It's
says,
Frorca. Why did words always have to be so challenging? It's French.
so to be clear, the Visconti Sforza deck was earlier, but it didn't have 78 cards. So can you really call it a
Okay.
tarot
So it
deck?
was So it was the first card. Okay, I see. Because it was more of a game. It was Tarocchi, Tarocchi, and it hadn't really progressed yet, probably as much as like what you just read. So that's good to know. But in the 1700s, tarot cards, like I said, were used for occult and divinatory purposes, particularly in France. Antoine Court de Gebelin and Jean-Baptiste Elianet Atelier linked the tarot to ancient mysteries. You've heard of Atelier, right?
Yeah, man, Court de Gebel. I think I've read some of his work.
Egyptian mythology and the Kabbalah is also linked at this time. 19th and 20th centuries, esoteric groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn refine the tarot's symbolic connections to astrology, numerology, and mysticism. This is where we see Aleister Crowley come on the scene, and some of the other Edward Casey, some of the main hitters of that time. Influential decks emerged, including Rider-Waite Tarot 1909. How about that date, Anthony?
Very nice.
The Rider-Waite Tarot was made in 1909, designed by Pamela Coleman Smith, under the direction of A.E. Waite, and the Thoth Tarot by Aleister Crowley and Lady Freida Harris. And I don't know a lot about Lady Freida Harris, but you can probably
She was
enlighten
the
us.
wife
And
of a British politician. That's all I know.
that's all you know. Okay, there's a story there. I just know it. But we're not going down that rabbit hole this evening.
That's the
So
story.
here
I'm
we
pretty
go.
sure I remember the story there actually. Lady Freida Harris basically desperately wanted Crowley to be her teacher, and she was a good painter, and it was
Mm.
her idea to make the deck, but he was pretty old at that point, and he was like, "Nah, I'm not really interested." And I forgot the key part of the story. I forgot what ultimately. Oh, it was money. It was money. He was broke at the end of his life, and Lady Freida Harris, wife of a British politician, had money. So she was like, "All right, how much money is it going to cost to get you to come stay at my house for a couple of months and coach me on how to paint these cards?" And that's how it came to be.
Fascinating. It might be worth to say, like, there was a lot going on at that time. I've begun to really dig into the 18th and 19th and 20th century and how everything kind of evolved to where we are right now through those timelines. And it's quite fascinating to see how things came to us, who they came through. It's interesting to note that within the tarot, it is the astrology completely, and how it is a fundamental building block to understand the complete layer of the card. And it is filled with many, many layers. Each card has symbolism depending on the artist and where they're trying to go with their deck and the theme. They're going to paint things a certain way. And so when you look at structured decks like the Waite deck, you're seeing a system that was brought to us. There is a plan and a purpose with the tarot. It has a place to go. It's a journey, which brings us to the Fool and the Fool's journey. The foolish man, as the Hermetic Tarot calls him, the spirit of ether. All right, well, I think that the theme of the Fool, if I had to, and there's a lot of information on Zero, the foolish man. It would be beginnings, innocence, and spontaneity. Because the symbolism, and I have the Waite deck that I am choosing as my blueprint, and Anthony's using the Thoth deck. And in fact, I don't think you've ever used the Waite deck, right? You've only used that deck?
Correct.
Okay.
And
cool. You must like that deck.
I do. It is the only one I use because I love that it has the planet in the sign. There's very few decks that have that, and it is the most beautiful deck that does have every planet in a sign for the number cards. The more I think
Just
about
kind
the
of lower.
Fool, the more it's hard to put any one theme on it. Because the more you look at it, the more you see he is everything, literally masculine and feminine. There's Jesus in him, there's the devil in him. The Fool is the potential for the entire universe.
Yeah. He's everything and he's nothing all at the same time. Well, what does the Fool look like in the Thoth deck? Zero.
But are you cut out? You said, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
Fool in the Thoth deck is very interesting. He has main features are the devil horns, which is makes it very distinct because you have to remember the Fool is very playful, right? As well, that's very Capricorn, very play hard aspect of it. And as we'll get into later, there's associations with Bacchus and Dionysus, right? They have a similar myth where the tiger involved. That's why there's a tiger biting at his leg. There is crocodile in the background because in ancient Egypt there's associations between fool and the crocodile, as we'll get into in the future. And of course, he's holding the crystal of Kether in his hand. That is the first Sephiroth. That is essentially the source. That is spirit. That is from which the entire universe emanates.
What
So did we
colors are
want
on that deck, on that card? I'm just curious
gold,
about how he shows up in that deck.
gold and green, the traditional, right? The green man, but also an influence of the sun.
Kind of like the Green Man.
Right, I'm going to get into later the Green Man of the Spring Festival, also known as the April.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So we want to get into
Okay.
the
Well, yeah, let's get into how he shows up. I have here the Fool archetype, a reoccurring figure in human storytelling, culture, and psychology. Represents qualities such as playfulness, wisdom through naivety. I think that's important to talk about in a minute. Subversion of the norms, or the ability to act freely outside conventional rules. Across the ages and societies, the fool has appeared in various forms, often under different names. And then I have a list of like, I think 9, and we're not going to go through them all, but how he has shown up and been called throughout antiquity. So I have him as the gesturing clown, where he shows up within medieval Europe, which of course, if we go back and we look at what the tarot was copied after, it was definitely, that's worth noting, it was definitely copied after the court and how the court operated and what was around the courts. And what is around the court was the jester, the clown, the fool, who entertained the monarchs with humor, often speaking truths under the guise of jokes like a comedian. In the Renaissance, the fool character in the Shakespearean play, The Fool and King Lear, provides comic relief and profound insights. In modern clowns, which I personally cannot stand. Can I tell you a true story really fast? Like this is kind of off topic, but I'm going to mark my spots so I know where I was. I was with a friend and we low dosed 2 grams of mushrooms and we were going to go see this epic movie. I do not remember what it was. This was a long time ago. And so we get there and, we took it at just the right time, so we knew exactly, and we knew the strain, and I grew it, so we knew, and we sit there, go in, and it's sold out. So we have to go to another movie, and I don't follow Stephen King. And she goes, "Oh, let's go to It." And I said, "Okay, that's cool. I trust you." And we go sit down and have you seen It? Like, man, it's about fucking clowns, man. And it's bad. And I don't like clowns. Like, it's a thing. And I'm on shrooms. It was quite a mental gymnastic of a situation to stay within the realms of reality and sanity. Yeah. Do you like clowns?
Oh, if you like clowns, there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't like
Oh,
clowns.
really? Yeah, they're old men too. They're always old men with young children, and that always creeped me out too. But that's a
Not
whole
to
other conversation.
mention, Barnum and Bailey was created supposedly, let's just be super legally safe. So I believe I have read somewhere that Barnum
Yes.
and Bailey was created by Freemasons, and supposedly you can read the their letters to each other where they talk
Mm-hmm.
about how the circus is their whole way of doing their rituals on the public without their knowledge.
Wow, I believe it. So I had the trickster, where Carolyn Myss in her archetype cards, she has the fool. She also has a trickster. It's a lot like the fool. But I want to read her card here. And this is a pretty cool deck if you want to work with archetypes and what you feel drawn to, because she has light attributes and then shadow. And it just gives you an opportunity to reflect on this archetype in your life, and perhaps where you've had lack or excess, you can see those were growth times in your life while working with this archetype. Because I don't think anybody comes in here, if you're truly a wanderer and a wayfarer and a seeker, which you probably are if you're listening to this, and a digger and a why kind of person, then you've looked at the balance of light and darkness, and you've looked at ways to live here and to incorporate yourself in healthy ways while still digging very deeply into these archetypes. And you probably identify with it like I do. So the Fool is fearlessly revealing emotion, helping people laugh at absurdity and hypocrisy. The court jester, the clown, the dumbling. This is from her book, Archetype Cards, Carolyn Myss, page 55. I do not own this. She says, represents what people would like to do or say themselves. But see, there's some of us that will say it. I'm one of those people. I don't care what I respect people, and I wouldn't say anything to harm anyone. But your opinion of me at the end of the day isn't as important as you think it is. You know, we can't be the fool. We can't go on our journey. And this is a very eccentric card. It's the rebel, the revolutionary to me. It's, I'm going to go my own way. Fleetwood Mac. It's very much a independent, spirited card, and it knows itself. And yeah, there's excesses, because in the Smith Waite, he's about ready to go off the mountain. The dog's like trying to warn him, and he's got one more step and he's over, and his head is back. And we'll go into symbolism later, but I continue. Often wears a mask that covers one's real emotions. So it's like you really feel this way, but in order for you to be able to say it, you have to put a mask on so that you can present it out into the play, because all of life is a play. And when you're the fool, you're walking on stage is what you're doing. You're showing up and you're looking around at what the stage looks like, which will be the house you were born in, and you're looking around at the people around you, which will be houses 1 through 6, and you're looking around at how to do this. Generally male. I thought that was interesting. She put this in here. Dumbling, it doesn't mean male either, like gender either. It could be male as in the expression of the energy, which would be the air and the fire signs. And it has been tied to Aquarius, tying to Uranus, tying to air, tying to ether, which you made mention of. Dumbling doesn't so much impart wisdom as kindness and simplicity. Shadow clown or fool manifests as cruel personal mockery or betrayal. And, you know, we've seen people do that, and that's never fun to watch, is it? Somebody like really cut down another person and mock them.
No. No. Well, I mean, sometimes it is. I mean, roast battles are a thing. I mean, it is pretty funny if, as long as no one's taking it seriously. That's the key to the fool.
it makes sense you would bring in that viewpoint. I'm all emotional in it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole, like,
Mm-hmm.
many shows on roast battles
Mm-hmm.
on TV and in YouTube, but it does take a certain type of tough skin, right? Because they do say the worst
It
shit
does.
about each other. Like they
I,
don't
I've
hold
only
back.
I've only watched a couple, and I really didn't like it because I don't like. I have Neptune on my ascendant, and even though I'm a Scorpio ascendant, I'm a lover, not a hater, and I don't want to see anybody. I mean, if something is true and it needs to be said, words can be both kind and true, right? You can still say it and be forthright and mean it, but you don't have
Just
to
trying to
call
avoid
people
mean spirited.
names. What's that?
It's just about trying to avoid mean spiritedness.
Yeah, which I don't think the fool cares much anyway about that. Shadow clown or fool manifests as cruel personal mockery or betrayal. Okay, I said that. Consider your use of humor in association with power, especially in a way that's fundamental to your personal protection and survival. The shadow aspects is using humor to wound rather than liberate, in denial of your emotional truth. You know, when I think of the fool, I just see him running out in the courtyard among all of the people and just saying the things that only the fool can get away with. But if you look back in history, and I wanted to bring this up, there is a podcast and YouTube channel called Background Info, YouTube Background Info. And he does an episode. It's just phenomenal on the history of the tarot with the Fool. So check him out. But what he did is he showed the Fool card throughout history and where it showed up in actual Fool cards, but then just antique as a clown. You know, in pictures, it was pretty cool. And it's only like, I think it's short. I sent it to you, but that's definitely worth looking at that. All right, we have mythology. We have Loki, the Norse mythology of a mischievous figure who challenges the gods, and Eshu, Legba or Yoruba, a divine messenger and clever manipulator of fate. We have Coyote and Raven, which is Native American, trickster animals who create and destroy with equal whimsy. Fairy tales. We've got Puck and Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Brer Rabbit in African American folklore. We have the Holy Fool, which shows up in Christian tradition with saints like Simon Stylites and Basil the Blessed, who acted eccentrically to expose societal or spiritual hypocrisy. These are the ones that will speak. And see, with all these planets going into air, we're going to have this come out a lot. We're going to have fool-like energy that is very courageous and adventurous and just wants to journey. And it's got a lot of momentum when it first comes out. Russian Orthodox culture, Yurdovivi, a fool for Christ who feigned madness to critique society. Eastern religions, there's Zen Buddhist masters and Sufi poets like Rumi, using paradoxes and absurdity to reveal deeper truths. There's the rebel or subversive fool, which I broke down into carnival and festivals and literature and modern satirists, like you see this in George Carlin, Don Quixote, Jon Stewart, whose critique and humor is on politics and society. It's almost like they can say things and they get away with it. Most people wouldn't say it. like the comedian, you know?
A lot of what
There's
you said earlier reminded me of things that comedians have said too. Like they weren't really big or strong, so when the bully cornered them, like they saved themselves by making the bully laugh. Like maybe they weren't the most attractive, but they were able to use humor to get women.
yes.
The survival and relationship to power that you mentioned before.
Mhm.
It seems to be the
We
key
have
to everything. You could just make someone laugh. You can pretty
yeah.
much get whatever you want.
Yes. Yes. Laughter is the best medicine. Laughter causes us to, for a moment, laugh at everyday things that can become very taxing and toiling and, just frustrating. But then you'll see a reel on it and, like, oh, he goes through that too. And they make it funny. And then you all laugh at it. That's the fool. All these people doing reels and putting their voice out there, you're the fool. Like you're putting yourself out there. That's not easy to do. A lot of
But you
people
just reminded me.
struggle with that.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, go ahead.
You
I
reminded
was
me of
just
something
saying,
really
I think
interesting
that's,
because
yeah.
you're aware of my introverted nature and how I don't like the spotlight. And I wasn't in elementary school specifically. I wasn't very popular. I didn't have friends or anything like that. But the one time where I did play the fool, where I actually was the class clown, was in religion class. Good old Catholic school. I fucking hate that shit. But I was too young to remember anything more specific than that.
Yeah, well, religion binds. It will always bind. Rules cannot be what drives your existence. So in folklore, the innocent or the naive fool comes up in the simpleton or the youngest sibling who triumphs in the protagonist of the fool of the world and the flying ship. In literature, Candide in Voltaire's satirical novel represents naive optimism, and in cinema, characters like Forrest Gump who succeed despite their simplicity. And that's the key here because this guy does succeed if he follows the royal road. Like if you work your way through the major arcana, you got the world, baby. You know how to thrive here in a matrix that's trying to siphon your energy and keep you in a carnation loop. They knew that. They knew something was up. They had to have. Do you know what I mean? The wise fool. In philosophy, Socrates, who professed ignorance as a path to wisdom, epitomized the paradoxical wisdom of the fool. Plays in literature, characters like Falstaff in Shakespearean's works blend buffoonery with sharp insight. Pop culture, Yoda from Star Wars. A seemingly eccentric being reveals profound wisdom. I'd also add the Bible says that it is the foolish things that confound the wise because God takes delight in those foolish things. It's a theme, and it confounds them. These learned men, and it's like the simple Jesus shows up at 12 in the temple talking about things, and it confounded them. But anyway,
I do have
the fool
a
is
bit. I do have quite a bit on all that in in a little bit when we get to my other sections. I didn't want to get in the
okay.
middle of yours.
No, no, you're fine. This is just all on how it shows up in antiquity and in our world. The fool is a cultural mirror. In the tarot, the fool card in the tarot represents beginnings, potential, and the embrace of the unknown. Art and literature, Modern culture, there's memes, internet trolls, and social media satire play this role by challenging norms and exposing contradictions. That is everywhere. I mean, the Fool, when you put Pluto in Aquarius, and if the Fool is ruled by Uranus, then you have it ruled by air, but this is fixed air. So, wow, this, this is the revolutionary. It really is. It's the person coming out that just wants to bring all of themselves out into the open. The entertainment, it's the stand-up comedian. You also had like Charlie Chaplin, silent film stars. Harlequin and Perriot brought the foolish archetype to Italian theater. Then you have the outsider wanderer, Odysseus, while a hero often plays the fool to outwit others. The fool in King Lear is both an observer and a commentator, providing an outsider's perspective. And characters like the Joker in DC Comics, who embraces chaos and challenges societal order. I think the Joker is an absolutely perfect example of the Fool, because we'll get into this, I know, but the Fool usually isn't liked. Even though he's telling the truth, there can be great, the Fool is very alone. Not lonely, but he's alone. It's a lone journey, right? So
Or
we
just
have,
seems like a
yeah,
madman, right? Because his truth is so mind blowing to everyone, or it's an angel in disguise, or something like that.
yeah. So I close with the Fool archetype remains timeless because it encapsulates human vulnerability, curiosity, and the need to challenge and question, as well as disrupt the status quo. I have a stellium of Virgo in the 11th house in Earth energy, of course, with Virgo, and ruled by Mercury. My Mercury's in Leo in the 10th. And I very much feel a need to talk about things. And this is exactly what I would be doing right now if I had Virgo in the 11th house or Gemini. This mercurial expression of my energy. And I really feel this strongly, that I went on a journey. My fool journey started about 15 years ago. It really was then that I busted out of the first layer of, oh my God, the world's not what I thought it was. When I understood our money system, and we've been down this road, I'm not going to go into it again, but you know what I'm talking about. And it's like, then I walked on this whole new journey I'd never been on before. And actually, I think a Scorpio ascendant does that over and over. The Scorpio archetype tends to do that. Transform, die, be born. Transform, die, be born. It's a whole thing. But each society reshapes this figure according to its values and challenges, making it one of the most adaptable and enduring archetypes. And I'm super excited to get into the more symbolism on the cards that show and the numerology. I'll hand it over to you, and we'll also get into the astrology of the tarot briefly as we talk through all this. I did want to say also, in astrology regarding zero and the Fool, zero is associated with the beginning of all things and can represent the first degree of any zodiac sign. So I think that's important. That zero degree are when the archetypes change, which there are 12 in astrology when you're looking at sun signs. However, directly related to the Fool card, it resonates with the energy of Aries. And then I just sat and thought about it and sat with it. And I'm like, you know what? I can see that, because even though it's Uranus and it represents air, in order for the Fool to go out in such a way on this journey, because if you look at the journey of the Fool, it's not easy. It's not an easy 2256 minor card, 22 major, 56 minor card journey, is it?
Oh, no, it's much more than that.
Yeah, so he knows he's up against, it's not going to be easy, but he doesn't care. He goes anyway, and that's really cardinal energy, and it reminds me of Aries. So I have to agree with this, that it could also be Aries, but still it's fire, right? Which on the Smith Waite card you can see the bright sunlight, which we're going to hit later. But it is all over this card. It beams down upon him in such abundance. You can't miss it.
In the Thoth deck,
And
the Fool is attributed to air, but there is also solar symbology.
yeah, well, where we see the first house, we see our mask. And haven't we been talking about it being a mask at times? This Fool card is what it's like you're stepping out from where are you born in the chart is the first house. That's the ascendant. That's the easternmost part of the chart, the darkest just before dawn. When you come in the portal of whatever ray is shining on the zodiac wheel of that specific sign at that point in time upon your chart. And that's your ascendant. And it's huge because it sets the blueprint for all of the other houses. So the power of the self is incredible in that first house. And Aries rules the first house and is also ruled by the Lord Mars. We all know about Mars if you study any astrology. So there's some power here that's coming. It's not just Sun, it's Mars too, which you see in the Smith Waite. There's red. The inside of his jacket, his sleeves, those big sleeves swaying, it's red. So it's lined in red, and I bet it's like a red crushed velvet. It's gorgeous. He's a very fancy boy as the Fool is standing on the mountain in the Smith Waite in his little yellow boots in his outfit he's got on, which we'll talk about. Anyway, I just think it's important to bring in Aries, the first house. And there's this transcendent and spirit with the zero, which I know you're probably going to talk about the zero, but it transcends linear concepts of time and space. It's the ether. It's allowing individuals to connect to their higher selves or universal truths. It could signify the purity of a soul free from earthly distractions. And I like that last sentence. I thought that's exactly how I feel when I sat with that. I'm like, it does make me feel like my authentic self when I just am who I am and I don't put so much importance on what other people think about what I'm doing. And I just live my life. And I have a Chiron where the wounds show up as a child. I have it in the fifth house of Leo, which is your playful house, your creativity, your fun house. It's where the Fool would want to live. It's romance, pleasures, entertainment, everything yang, sun expression as the sun rules the fifth house. So with Chiron there, it like dim my light, y'all.
Here's a bit on the Hebrew letter that is attributed to the Fool card. And everything I will be quoting from here on is from the Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley, where he explains his Thoth deck. This card is attributed to the letter Aleph, which means ox, but by its shape, the Hebrew letter, so it's said, represents a plowshare. Thus, the significance is primarily phallic. It is the first of the three mother letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which correspond in various interwoven fashions with all the triads that occur in these cards. notably fire, water, air, fire, father, mother, son, sulfur, salt, mercury, rahas, sattvas, tamas. This card is therefore both the father and the mother, the most abstract form of these ideas. It is not a confusion, but a deliberate identification of the male and the female, which is justified by biology. The fertilized ovum is sexually neutral. It is only some unknown determinant in the course of development which decides the issue. It is necessary to acclimatize oneself to, at this first sight, strange idea. As soon as one has made up one's mind to consider the feminine aspect of things, the masculine element should immediately appear in the same flash of thought to counterbalance it. Right? And that is because the Fool is the potential of everything. It is the very first card, deeply connected to Kether as well, which is just energy. It's just source. A quick note on the number where he says, the really important feature of this card is that its number should be 0. And I'll note, in a lot of cards, the Fool is 1. So this is a choice by the author based on a philosophical difference or philosophical understanding. He continues, it represents, therefore, the negative above the tree of life, the source of all things, right? That's how it can be both the mother and the father. He says it is the Kabbalistic 0. The whole idea of Kabbalah is that all creation emanates from the same single source. So if the mother and the father both emanate from the same source, that source has to contain both the mother and the father. It's not some message about go be trans, no, grow up. It's if your mom and dad and everyone in the universe both came from the same source, that source has to be both masculine and feminine. He continues, it is the equation of the universe, the initial and final balance of opposites. Air in this card, therefore, quintessentially means vacuum. So I'm going to continue. Here's a little story that gets into a little bit of deck structure in an abstract way. Gets into the wandering fool, the who becomes the king, why the knights are the kings in the Thoth deck, and a little bit of etymology as well. All in the same passage taken from the Thoth, the Book of Thoth by Crowley. It is necessary, in order to understand the tarot, to go back in history to the matriarchal age, to the time when succession was not through the firstborn son of the king, but through his daughter. The king was therefore not king by inheritance, but by right of conquest. In the most stable dynasties, the new king was always a stranger, a foreigner. What is more, he had to kill the old king and marry that king's daughter. This system ensured virility and capacity of every king. The stranger had to win his bride in open competition. In the oldest fairy tales, this motive is continually repeated. The ambitious stranger is often a troubadour, who, if you don't know, that is a musician poet. Nearly always he is disguised, often in a repulsive form. Beauty and the Beast is a typical tale. There is often a corresponding camouflage about the king's daughter, as in the case of Cinderella and the Enchanted Princess. The tale of Aladdin gives the whole of this fable in a very elaborate form, packed with the technical tales of magic. Here, then, is the foundation of the legend of the wandering prince. And note well, he is always the fool of the family. The connection between foolishness and holiness is traditional. It is no sneer that the family nitwit had better go to church. That's a good pun. I'm sorry. In the East, the madman is believed to be possessed, a holy man or prophet. So deep is this identity that is actually embedded in the language. Silly is derived from the German word selig, meaning holy, blessed. And here's another note on etymology. Fool is derived from the word phallus, meaning a wind bag. And he continues, even etymology gives the attribution to air. Also, to puff out the cheeks is a gesture implying readiness to create in the sign language of Naples. Worse, some English guardians of democracy impute folly to others by the raspberry. I
This
thought
is
that was pretty.
Aleister Crowley
Yeah,
from his Thoth deck.
this is from the Book of Thoth. Yeah, he explains the Thoth deck, but he
Okay, I just want to
uses
make sure
the
I'm on the same
older
page.
name. Yep, quite humorous. And yeah, I find those etymology connections astounding. Like it's hard to attribute the fool
Mm-hmm.
to anything but wind with those attributions. Okay, so
Well, you know, when you think about when you're born, it's called the breath of life.
first thing
That's
you do is
air.
cry, and if you're not crying, it's a
First
problem.
thing you do is breathe on your own. That's the first thing you do, I think. But at some point, you must breathe on your own.
There,
But yeah, crying will get you there, right? Yeah,
you
that's
last.
why you
It's
cry.
like
Yeah, I've heard that.
3 months without food, 3 weeks without water, no, sorry, 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air.
Well, the thing about the fool is you really, you're like, well, everybody has a journey. Everybody's born. No, some people are NPCs. Is that what they're called?
Yeah,
What are
I've been,
non-essential
sometimes I
characters
wonder
called?
about that. I haven't come
No,
to a
I think,
conclusion. Yeah, you
well,
got
I
it right.
think they are because I was one until I was awakened. And I mean that. I was totally like the damn movie. Like I just did not know things that I should have known. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I went down that road where I just studied so much. It was like, it was heartbreaking. When you start to look at your past that you grew up with and you thought that it was part of your journey, it's the bedrock of your experiences, these cultural trends of 7 years, 14 years, Pluto sometimes in a house, 20 years or more. I mean, it's a big deal, right? Things change. And then you look back on it and you're like, well, that was a lie and that was a lie. And, you know, there's proof. And now things are being declassified left and right. And I've yet to look at the JFK stuff, but I'm sure it's not going to be good. And it becomes this place where you awaken and you're on a new path. And it's one of often it's alone because you can't go with the status quo. You have to be the foolish man. You have to break away and you have to break away from this is what I see him doing. He's willing to be like, well, this might not be the right way, but I can't stay here. What is New Hampshire's? Live free or die. There it is. It's the state motto, live free or die here. That's what I see in the fool. Like, I can't, like, yes, it would hurt to leave, but it hurts more to stay. That's the fool. And he decides to go on this journey. It's not like he just drops there. It's a choice, is what I'm saying. And I think that needs to be remembered that not everybody answers it and goes on this journey, and they don't go through the mystical layers of the major arcana to understand what's really going on in our world, because it's not something our culture taught us and was around us and was passed down to us, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a lot that the West doesn't pass down that the East has that I'm jealous of, like astrology and the traditions of
Yeah,
the land thousands of years ago and all that.
for sure. Yes. And that world is just starting to really open up to me. It's exciting to read. I knew it through Reiki. I went down that whole story, and that was quite some time ago now. And that really helped me to embrace. It just came to me so strongly. I went through all the training and it just immersed myself in it. And I just saw a whole new way of doing healing that really resonated with how I'm wired and how my chart came in, and my energetic signatures and my DNA and epidemiology. What, what I inherited from my mother while I was in rebellion. Okay, all kinds of layers that make me who I am, right? Where I was born, who raised me, who was there, who wasn't there, all that leaves imprints on the auric field of a person residing within their cellular makeup. There's vibration there that can be held on to. And I went down the whole path, but one must be willing to step off the cliff. That's the symbolism of him there, almost ready to fall off. Not so much, you're such an idiot, the dog's warning you, don't step over, as much to me as I see it. No, I'm going to step off this cliff. My head's back. I'm pack light. What I have matters. Everything that I'm holding is really important to talk about, but I'm going. And my back is to you. See, his back is to wherever he came from. And to
My
other
people don't like
people,
them.
that, yeah, they're like, you're different. This is Lady Gaga. This is Cher. This is radical people that show up within society and choose to be. This is Johnny Depp. This is people that are like, I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to pretend, esse quam videre, to be rather than to appear. I have that tattooed on my back. It's Latin. And it just means, to me, I am who I am. I'm not hiding. I'm not pretending. I don't answer to you. I don't answer to anyone. I answer to myself and my conscious. And I think the guides, the gods and goddesses that work with me, I don't worship them, but I can appreciate their own archetype signatures of a better way to live and better way to do relationships and a better way to be, because it's not easy being here. I'm gonna be honest. It's not. It's Saturn. And, if you just fall into it, bless you. I'm glad that that was your experience. But if you look at the stats within the United States on mental health and loneliness worldwide, not only in the United States, and depression, and the pharmaceutical rate that we're taking drugs to try to heal it, it's astounding. It's not good. So all is not right. And perhaps it's because we've not allowed the foolish man. Perhaps there's no room for the fool. He's just too outlandish. He just says the Illuminati's real. That's what the fool would say. No, that it really is, he would say. Bohemian Grove is real. It is a thing. The Masons, the Knights of Templar, the Golden Dawn, all of these systems and people and times, it's all things. And then everybody kind of shuns him because he's foolish. He's not living in the bounds. He's not staying in the structures that we have set up for him. And that's a true Aquarian. They don't
CEOs who drop
need,
out of college.
it's all of that. It's the leader of the pack when the kids are young, wanting to try new things and do new things. It's the one always in front, like Leo. Very much has Leo energy on it, because you need an ego to be able to do that. Either that or you're doing it to run away, but I don't see. I think the tarot would have depicted that. The blah, blah, blah. The tarot knows how to depict angst and horror and harm and hurt in the tarot. There's cards that show that, and this card's nothing like that. This is a very bright, happy card. It has hope. It has potential.
When you think about
What's
air, like
that?
it's so hard. When you think about air, it's so hard to control, right? And I think that's where the going your own way comes from more than an ego. Like it's just the nature of what it is. Like it was born to be wild and free. You can't put it in a cage.
Yeah. And when you're born into a culture, you are in essence, a byproduct of your surroundings. You can't help it because your economic survival's there, in your security, in your relationships of nurturing and growth and protection and role models, and all of that is tied with that. I think the Fool is also, these are yellow golden boots he's wearing here. Like these boots were made for walking. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hold of the sun.
this signifies sometimes, I think, in this card, like I know we'll get to the symbolism. I should probably wait, but I'll just say it here quick. I think it just talks about how he just thinks he's untouchable. It's a little bit impetuous. It's a little bit pie in the sky, golden boots kind of thing.
Aries in the
I don't
sky.
think it's so. Yeah, I don't think it's so much like your road's going to be blessed and it's going to be beneficial. Like the sun is kind of showing power and bounty and warmth. The boots, although it's the same color of the sun, he's walking on these. He's using them differently than the sun just shining on him. That's not him, but the boots he chose. The boots he chose, along with his little fancy yellow flowers he's got going, or she's got going on. This can be male or female, by the way. But hey, I know you have more, so let's get to what you have here.
So here is the Green Man of the Spring Festival, April Fool, the Holy Ghost. The tradition represents the original idea adapted to the understanding of the average peasant. The Green Man is a personification of the mysterious influence that produces the phenomena of spring. It's hard to say why it should be so, but it is so. There is a connection with the ideas of irresponsibility, of wantonness, of idealization, of romance, of starry dreaming. The fool stirs within all of us at the return of spring, and because we are a little bewildered, a little embarrassed, it has been thought a salutary custom to externalize the subconscious impulse by ceremonial means. It was a way of making confession easy. Of all these festivals, it may be said that they are perfect, that they are representations in the simplest form, without introspection, of a perfectly natural phenomenon. It speaks again to that just being what you are, not thinking about it, that no introspection, just you're a baby that was just born, you're gonna take in a breath of air. Like you're a fish, you're gonna swim through the water. Right? If you're a rebel, you're gonna go your own way.
Hmm. Yes.
I had a bit longer section on the Great Fool of the Celts if you wanted to add anything before I get into that.
Well, it reminds me of that song by Bruce Springsteen. I'm Generation X, last part of the boomers and early Generation X. And baby, I was born to run. It reminds me of that song. Go and check out those lyrics. I won't share them here, but that song's all about the rebel, the one that was meant to go out. Some of us are just meant to travel and look and search, and it may mean you're doing it from your armchair. It's air. So you can go places in your spirit. You can do traveling if your body won't take you. If you're listening to this and you're challenged and you can't leave your house and you're like, well, I can't go on a journey. I can't even walk. You don't need to walk. This is what we're talking about here when we start getting into the deeper layers. This card's about a mystical journey as well, an awakening that must take place within you so you can come out of the matrix. Because once you learn all of these cards and you begin to work with them, magic happens for the good of all. It does. And it's profound. But I'm digressing. I just got to say, working with these cards has really helped my mental health because there's more to it than just the pictures. There's all of the symbol imagery and all the colors. It's everything coming together and the layers of meaning working together. And it engages that imaginative, intuitive mind, the subconscious mind that sees in symbols and images. And it's a whole different part of the mind than the mind that wants to put things together. This part of the mind is like the fool. It's free and it flows. And this is where you can draw and do art and write music. And you have those incredible moments where you're like, man, we were in the zone. You ever felt that way?
I have felt that way. I would disagree slightly because I would say there is an aspect of these cards that is useful for people who like to analyze things and overanalyze things. People like me, because there's so many connections with the attributions that were made, and sorry, there is a predictive power to it as well, and not just obviously in doing tarot readings, but in learning the archetypes in your everyday life. You know, if you are paying attention and you meet a new person and you start to notice they have some emperor traits, you're not going to be surprised when when they show you their horns, right? It is a lot, like you said, like learning the code to the matrix. There is a lot of explanatory and predictive power in your everyday life just from understanding the archetypes.
It empowers you, and that's something that if a regime were trying to control and suppress a people for enslavement and domination would want. They wouldn't want enlightened beings walking around having a firm sense on the first hermetical law that this is a mental universe. The law of mentalism. This is a mental universe. And that we can think through the power of thought and intention, we can create incredible things and they can manifest. And that's how it works here. And when you understand the power of that, you no longer live shackled. I used to watch this show. Huge shout out to this show because although it was corny and it was old and it was really fundamental Bible, I mean, it was called Unshackled. And when I first became a Christian years ago, this was on the radio. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. I mean, this was a long time ago. And I would listen to it on the radio. And it was just real live stories that were acted out about people whose lives, were on the down and out, and then they found Christ. But what I'm saying is, where was I going with Unshackled?
Yeah, fool.
Where was I going with that? There's a sense that, let me read this. Because the foolish man, when I read that it's the spirit of ether, the foolish man, I always saw ether as like intelligence. Like air is smart people, because look at what signs it rules. The first time we see air is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, known to be the planet of how do you use your intelligence, which requires you to think and speak and talk and communicate, ruled by Gemini, and then ruled by Virgo, how do you take your body, your physical body, and take care of it and take your body in a very dignified, pure, clean, organized way, in ways of health, in ways of healing, in ways to make something pure and better, and you analyze it and you correct it, and how do you put it down on Earth through Mercury? The higher octave of Mercury is Uranus, which rules the Fool. And so now when you get to Uranus, you're not in that lower mundane knowledge. You're up there in the 11th house, and you're almost done with the wheel. Like this is important to know. Yes, the first house we talked about, but if you take Uranus, we've got to start with the 11th and then add the first. Because the first really only adds individuality to me and being able to go out in your cardinal fire. But the 11th is where you show up. And this is the individual, the Aquarian in fixed air, that's definitely going his own way. And he's very fixed about it because Saturn rules him as well. And he takes his air and he just does it his own way, like the Frank Sinatra song. He doesn't really care or think. Like it's a sign of intelligence. So I always saw this intelligence that comes with this card, because the other air sign is Libra, and that's a cardinal sign, and that any cardinal house just bears more power, and that's the 7th house of cardinal air.
I love it.
So what I'm saying is you have a lot of intelligence in those 3 signs, but it's called the foolish man. But air is not foolish. Usually, it's not. It's where, man, if we didn't have air, we'd have all this emotion in earth, and we'd just roll around in it, and we wouldn't evolve and change and grow and become something different, because air blows the seeds and takes them, right?
That's a very good way of putting it.
And that it's the spirit of ether. It's like, okay, so it's the foolish man in air, represented by those 3 air signs, represented by those 3 houses in a fixed, cardinal, immutable way. If it's ether, we have to include all the air. But in the Fool, that's considered wise. Do you see, it's like an oxymoron. It's like, wink, wink, this really is the way to go. But it looks like a fool to the world. It's the jester who turns and says a joke about the king, and he's going to get his head cut off for it. But everybody laughs because they know it's true. So if you become the wise man of this world, you'll lose. And Jesus talked about that. The foolish things of the world, confound the wise, and to just be the fool, to have the innocence of a child, to go your own way, to play, to be adventurous. And I just, getting back to my original thought, which has been long, but I never saw air that way until I looked at this card and began to see air different. That, yeah, It's got this detachment, is where I'm going. And as a Cancer stellium, with all my mushy emotional feelings up there in the ninth all together, damn it, I just don't get hugged by these people.
Oh,
Like they're not warm, they're not mean, but they're just cool. They're just not warm people in general. They're very loving, very kind, very good people. Yes, but they're not warm and fuzzy. Like they won't squish you with me on the couch and eat cookies and watch movies and laugh and giggle and not take this too seriously. Because if that's the other thing, and I'll stop, but we're going to have to talk about this. The Fool also stands for literally not taking things so seriously, because this is a play and you have an avatar and you really
he
are on
doesn't.
stage. It really is a thing. No, it
He
really is a
doesn't
thing.
take. He doesn't take
If you don't
seriously.
figure it out, chances are you're going to do it again, man. You're not going to be like Neo and get out. You got to get out. Like I'm hoping I'm getting out now because I know to get out. So if you know to get out, then you must be out, and then you must get out, and then you're out.
And the fool really does make it to the end of his journey. I mean, the lesson is he's really not so foolish. It just seems foolish to you because he's just a new generation, a new baby on a new different level, doing things a new way. It's
Yes.
not out of ego, it's just how they were born.
Yeah.
There's another connection to the fool, which I didn't include in here, but is also in the book of Thoth on the Egyptian god Hor Pra Krat, who is the main story about him is as a baby, coming out of the lotus flower and walking on crocodiles.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I've heard of this. Yes. He's everywhere. That's why I kind of gave that run in at the beginning. He's all over the place. She as well. But think about this too. It's the spirit of ether. I'm going to read this now. This is from the Hermetic Tarot, based upon the esoteric workings of the Secret Order of the Golden Dawn by Godfrey Dowson, U.S. Game Systems Incorporated. I do not own this information. This is black and white. I highly recommend this deck. But zero, the foolish man, the spirit of ether, Aleph, like you said, ox, Pluto. The sun indicates a bright spring morning. The two-part triangle in the upper right of the card represents air. The symbol of Pluto appears in the midst to the front of the man. The foolish man stands with his worldly belongings at the edge of a precipice, ignorant of the lashing waves and the crocodile with open jaws. How about that? You just talked about crocodiles. The foolish man holds in his right hand the rose of joy, signifying perfect innocence, and he holds a fierce wolf in check by a leash. See, he's not walking alone either, and many people miss that. I got my Lucy Lou sitting next to me here on her little comfy pillow. I got her set up, man. She is never more than 10 feet from me. And I've had her, she's going to be 12 years old. And there's something about a dog. That's all I have to say about that, man. She knows everything about me. And that wolf or that dog is imperative. It's part of the story. Also signifying the bestial energies within the instincts. And I get that. But I think it also represents that his companionship that he chooses is an animal and not a human. He could have been holding hands with another person here. That's not how the fool comes
About
out.
That can be very wise.
Behind him sprouts the flower of silence. The higher significance of this card suggests that the foolish man's perfect innocence is holding the wolf. Thus, the anger of worldly wisdom is held in check by perfect innocence. And you know what that means? That's like the little girl who goes up to the man with the big pot belly and pokes at it and says, "When are you having your baby?" And he's not pregnant. He's not pregnant. He's not pregnant. She's telling the truth, though. He does look that way. It's the fool in the room, the innocence that gets away with saying something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. To me, in the, that same metaphor made me think of how women tend to calm men down, bring out their better quality. Like, no, don't get into that fight. Don't stop being so hot headed and all that. Women do have a way of taming the worst qualities of men in a very sometimes gentle, sometimes not so gentle way.
I see what you're saying. I dig that. All right, he goes on, meanings, idea, thought, sensitivity, the flesh, eternal life, spirituality, initiative, folly, foolishness, reversed, bad decision, indecision, apathy, and hesitation. So it infers if you don't go out on your journey, because nobody wants to walk upside down, you can't for one, but for too long, unless you're trying to do the Guinness World Book of Records, but not many people do that. So bad decision. Bad decision not to go out on your own journey. It's considered in the tarot to be the right thing to do to go out on your journey, whereas the world thinks it's foolishness, is what I'm saying. So that was the Hermetic Tarot. All right, keep going. What else you got?
Okay, so I have the Great Fool, the Celts, the Lua, a little similar to the Wise Fool you mentioned before, but a little different as you see. So to continue from the Book of Thoth, this is a considerable advance on those purely naturalistic phenomena above described, referencing the Green Man. In the Great Fool is a definite doctrine. The world is always looking for a savior. The doctrine in question is philosophically more than a doctrine. It is a plain fact. Salvation, whatever salvation may mean, is not to be obtained on any reasonable terms. Reason is an impasse. Reason is damnation. Only madness, divine madness, offers an issue. And I would insert here, this is why all of the sword cards in the tarot deck tend to be unpleasant, difficult energy. Right? That's the reasoning behind it. Because your mind can be your worst enemy at times. But the bigger idea is what he just said. Reason is damnation. Only divine madness is the way. Gotta continue.
Yeah,
Wanted to
letting
say
go
something.
and letting go and suspending all opinion is the way to growth. Being able to hear another person's opinion, being able to go out and hear things that are not of your own is what he's talking about there too, I think.
So continue. The law of the Lord Chancellor will not serve. The lawgiver may be an epileptic camel driver like Mohammed, a megalomaniac provincial upstart like Napoleon, or even in exile, 3 parts learned, 1 part crazy, an attic dweller in Soho, like Karl Marx. There is only one thing in common among such persons. They are all mad, that is, inspired. Nearly all primitive people possess this tradition, at least in a diluted form. They respect the wandering lunatic, for it may be that he is the messenger of the Most High. The queer stranger, let us entreat him kindly. It might be an angel that we entertain unawares. Closely bound up with this idea is the question of paternity. A savior is needed. What is one thing certain about his qualifications? That he should not be an ordinary man. In the Gospels, people cavilled about him, about the claim that Jesus was the Messiah because he came from Nazareth, a perfectly well-known town, because they knew his mother and his family. In brief, they argued that he did not qualify as candidate for Savior. The Savior must be a peculiar, sacred person. That he should be a human being at all is hardly credible. At the very least, his mother must be a virgin, and to match his wonder, his father cannot be an ordinary man. Therefore, his father must be a god. But as a god is a gaseous vertebrate, he must be some materialization of a god. Very good. Let him be the god Mars under the form of a wolf, or Jupiter as a bull, or a shower of gold, or a swan, or Jehovah in the form of a dove or some other creature of fantasy, preferably disguised in some animal form. There are innumerable forms of this tradition, but they all agree on one point. The Savior can only appear as a result of some extraordinary accident, quite contrary to whatever is normal. The slightest suggestion of anything reasonable in this matter would destroy the whole argument. But as one must obtain some concrete picture, the general solution is to represent the Savior as the fool. Attempts to attain this condition appear in the Bible. Note that coat of many colors of Joseph and Jesus. It is the man in motley who brings his people out of bondage. And I wanted to ask you about that because I know you know a
Mm.
lot more of the Bible than me. What is the coat of many colors of Joseph and Jesus?
Yeah, the coat of many colors is a color that Joseph's father made for him, and his brothers stole it. And it becomes a whole thing when they attempted to murder him. Well, they sold him off, is what they did, rather. So there's a whole story to his coat of many colors. The brothers were extremely jealous that the father made this coat for him. And, true bad, too. I think it was Abraham was his father. I'm not quite sure who his father was, but you shouldn't make one coat for one kid and not give them to the rest. But I think he had like 12 brothers or something. All them people in the family back then, because the more sons you had, the more richer you could be, because the more work they could do and shit, like all that patriarchal stuff, that whole way.
Right.
And I can see a point to that. But not to the point of murdering female babies, where men take it, and where it goes rogue really, really quick. Where it's like if you allow that, it becomes a thing and then away, and then it becomes stupid if you have a female, so she's not useful. It's just, anyway, that actually happens. That actually happens.
Interesting.
So
So
yeah, that's all I have on that.
this was my introduction to the fool being associated with being a savior. If you think about it from what we know, it makes sense going from both directions, right? Because if you study mythology enough, you have come across where many things that are a part of Jesus's life in the story are also a part of things that other gods and goddesses have done before him verbatim, like Dionysus turning water into wine. And Dionysus,
Right.
definitely more of the devil archetype. He has horns. He's about madness and ecstasy. And also, as we discussed before, if this is a representation of Kether, the reason why it makes sense that he is the mother and the father is because this is where all things come from. The source. He's
Yeah.
holding the crystal of
Yeah.
Kether in his hand. So
He's definitely
if
yes.
we can see that he does have some devil energy in them, then as Crowley must said, as soon as we consider one idea, we have to consider the opposite, especially when we're dealing with the fool, who is the potential of all things. So if we can see a devil archetype in him, then it does make sense that there is a savior archetype. And continue a bit more on this in the next section of Dionysus and Bacchus.
Bacchus. Yes, Bacchus. Yeah, and Kether is the crown, is the first, it's the highest of the Sephiros. Is that how you say that? Sephiros?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, Pluto's also up there. So where you have just this complete willingness, you could say, to transform and be utterly reborn. That would be the fool showing up on the scene, being born again. So it highly ties into karma, where your journey begins, in the wheel anyway. And I think in life in general. What archetypes that you are drawn to, I think has a lot to do with karma. Don't you? When you start working in those realms of symbolism and imagination,
Possibly
and certain
karma,
themes
but
keep occurring
it
over and
also feels
over.
like,
It's like,
sorry, yeah, possibly karma, but it also feels like an essential part of who I am, like baby aspect of the fool. Like it is only instinct at a certain level to me. Here's a section on Dionysus and Bacchus as the fool. They're often treated as one. They have very similar traits. Sometimes their names are interchangeable in certain myths. Continuing from the Book of Thoth. It is convenient to treat the two gods as one. Zagreus, a title of Dionysus, is only important to the present purpose because he possesses horns, and because in the Eleusinian mysteries it is said that he was torn to pieces by the Titans. But Athena rescued his heart and carried it to his father Zeus. His mother was Demeter. He is thus the fruit of marriage between heaven and earth. See, there are those opposites again. This
yeah,
identifies him as Baal of the Tetragrammaton, but the legends of his death refer to initiation, which accords with the doctrine of the devourer. In this card, however, the traditional form is much more clearly expressive of Bacchus diffuse, who represents a more superficial form of worship. The ecstasy characteristic of the god is more magical than mystical. The latter demands the name Iacchus, whereas Bacchus and Semele for a mother, who was visited by Zeus in the form of a flash of lightning which destroyed her, but she was already pregnant by him. Zeus saved the child. Until puberty, he was hidden in the thigh, i.e., the phallus, of Zeus. Hera, in revenge for her husband's infidelity with Semele, drove the boy mad. This is the direct connection with the card. The legend of Bacchus is, first of all, that he was diffuse, meaning double-natured, and this appears to mean more bisexual than hermaphroditic. His madness is also a phase of his intoxication, for he is preeminently the god of the vine. He goes dancing through Asia, surrounded by various companions, all insane with enthusiasm. They carry staffs headed with pine cones and entwined with ivy. They also clash cymbals, and in some legends are furnished with swords or twined about with serpents. All the half gods of the forest are male companions of the Maenad women. In his pictures, his drunken face and the languid state of his lingam connect him with the legend mentioned about the crocodile. His constant attendant is the tiger, and in all the best extant examples of this card, the tiger or panther is represented as jumping upon him from behind, while the crocodile is ready to devour him in the front. In the legend of his journey through Asia, he is said to have ridden on an ass, which connects him to Priapus, who is said to have been his son by Aphrodite. It also reminds one of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. It is curious, too, that the fabled birth of Jesus, the Virgin Mother is represented as being between an ox and an ass, and one remembers that the letter Aleph means ox. In the worship of Bacchus, there was
Right.
a representative of the god, and he was chosen for his quality as young and virile, but effeminate man. In the course of the centuries, the worship naturally became degraded. Other ideas joined themselves to the original form, and partly because of the orgiastic character of the ritual, the idea of the fool took definite shape. Hence, he came to be represented with a fool's cap, evidently phallic and clad in motley, which again recalls the coat of many colors worn by Jesus and Joseph. The symbol is not only mercurial, but zodiacal. Joseph and Jesus, with 12 brothers or 12 disciples, equally represent the sun in the midst of the 12 signs. It was only very much later that any alchemical significance was attributed to this, and that at a time when the Renaissance scholars made rather a point of finding something serious in important symbols, which were in reality quite frivolous.
Hmm.
And see, there he made the idea of the savior and the fool make so much sense there, and there's so much symbology between the ox and the ass and Jesus, but Bacchus is definitely more of a devil archetype. It's a very interesting study to combine these two ideas in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's this whole idea with the fool. I can't help but see reincarnation and this happening like over and over until you finally aren't the fool anymore and you don't come down to earth and you stop having these experiences. Listen to this. This is from a book on Tarot Beyond the Basics, Gain a Deeper Understanding of the Meanings Behind the Cards, Anthony Lewis. I've had this book many years, and I highly recommend it. But he says this on page 244 under the chapter, I guess that's irrelevant. But he says, arranging the major arcana as a mandala. And I bring this in for a reason with what you were saying. In tarot and psychology, Jungian psychologist Arthur Rosengarten suggests that the major arcana can be arranged in a circle of interbeing with the fool at the center. In this way, he avoids the idea of the fool's journey as a linear step-by-step progression in time through the major arcana. Instead, the fool has access to all the lessons of the major arcana cards simultaneously. These lessons are thus interdependent and interrelated, just as in real life. So in essence, if you act like the fool, it's going to open up access. And I think if if there is this thing to karma or reincarnation, it's like then I'm here this time as a fool in a different way, and I have access to everything that I already know. I have access to everything when I become the fool. I have access to all the lessons of the major arcana cards simultaneously. Why? Because it's ether, right? It's spirit. It's the part they took away and they just left fire, air, earth, and water. And they took ether away from us. They took our knowledge and our access to all the lessons of the major arcana cards simultaneously. Do you get what I'm
They made you think
talking about
you're
here?
some crazy astrology person. Like the West, like if you even talk about astrology, like you're mocked, like, oh, what a retard, you believe in astrology. Eh.
Yeah, or anything, any modality like that. You know, there's
Or
still a
anything
lot of,
spiritual at all.
yeah, what they forget, that the witch is nothing more at the end of the day than recognizing there are elements that rule this world, and you can work with them in a magical way when you add your own intuitive energy, that which is within to that which is above, or ether, or air, or you act like the fool and you go on this journey of individualism and not feel bad about it. You know, when I look at the Fool card here, this person's not bumming out, man. This person looks like they just dropped some good shrooms and they're just really feeling good, you know, or they're just very happy. They're very blissful. There's no pressure here. So that just suggests some arrogance though too, and ignorance as well. But these lessons are thus interdependent and interrelated, just as in real life. In the Marcel deck of the 1700s, this goes way back, right? So this is like the back with the Smith Waite deck too, well, before the Smith Waite deck. Waite switched the Marcel positions of strength and justice so the trumps in his deck would correspond to the signs of the zodiac, in which Libra, the seventh sign, comes later than Leo, the fifth. That's interesting. So anyway, 0, the fool, the foolish man, the madman, lunatic, air, folly, mania, extravagance, intoxication, delirium, frenzy, bewrayment, Bewrayment. When I first read that, I've never read that word anywhere else before. It's equivalent to betrayal. Reversed: negligence, absence, distribution, carelessness, apathy, nullity, my God, and vanity. The Golden Dawn assigned the foolish man to the element air and warned that with regard to practical matters of ordinary life, this card suggests folly, stupidity, and odd behavior. Modern writers have connected the Fool with Uranus, the planet of novelty and unexpected events. Air belongs to the sanguine temperament, so we can expect the Fool to be sociable, relationship-oriented, optimistic, playful, happy-go-lucky, impulsive, and pleasure-seeking. Sanguine individuals enjoy being with people and circulating in social circles. They see life as pregnant with possibilities. That's something, like, there was a lot of negative attributes that they assign, but you've got a lot of promise here, so I don't know why they led. This is, remember, the 1700s, right? Why he led with such a harsh. What do you think?
Well, the what really stood out to me was the pregnant with possibilities because it also made me think of what is considered the very last card in the deck, which in the Thoth deck, that is the Princess of Discs. And she is also pregnant with possibility. And in the mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune, she drops a really interesting one liner piece of knowledge that kind of connects all this. And so you can put it all together. The lowest sphere on the sphere of life, the last sphere where the Princess of Discs is called Malkuth. And she says that Kether is the Malkuth of the unmanifest veils. and the unmanifest veils refers to what is above, before Cather. So it seems to speak to an as above, so below holographic universe,
Yeah.
eating at every single level infinitely type of thing.
Right, Kether being the crown one,
And
and
Malkuth is the
Malkuth
last
being 10th
earth.
kingdom, elements of all things.
Yeah.
Yes, the kingdom. Yes. Well, he goes on to say here, because of the connection with the element air, sanguine people are fond of travel, both physical and mental. Like a newborn child, the Tarot Fool is starting out on a journey of self-discovery. In the Waite Smith deck, the Fool is perched on the edge of a precipice, preparing for a leap of faith. In older decks, the Fool looks like a wandering jester, possibly schizophrenic, who is capable of both lunacy and profound insight into the human condition. Gareth Knight regards the Fool as the genuine spirit of the Tarot. I hear here really like high autistic people who can't really look at you and have a conversation, but they can play Tchaikovsky. You know, they
Right.
can
Also,
do incredible things.
also the schizophrenic connection.
Yeah,
I heard that
absolutely.
a long time ago they didn't think schizophrenic people were crazy. They thought schizophrenic people were basically wide open to the other side, and the shamans would train them to be a shaman.
Right.
So
You
no, he's
learn
not
your
some
own
crazy
magic.
mad fool. There's just
You learn.
there he's in touch with some real wisdom that most people don't understand. So it seems like badness to the outside perception.
This is, yeah, exactly right.
Like how many horror movies or just action movies start out with like a homeless person yelling about something on the street and everyone thinks they're crazy and that at the end of the movie it's happening.
Mhm. The youthful pages of the tarot deck can be viewed as subpersonalities of the Fool. Like the Fool, the pages possess a childlike openness and sense of wonder as they set forth to learn the lessons of their respective suits. Sometimes young people act like fools, rushing in where angels fear to tread. The Fool may appear in a reading to warn us that we're acting foolish in a practical situation of everyday life. Okay, so that was again Tarot Beyond the Basics by Anthony Lewis. Good book. But I think that we really definitely have a good idea of the theme and the understanding of the Fool. Do you have a little bit more to share? And then let's get into the actual imagery in the card, if you don't mind.
I have that is what I have. I have a description of the imagery and I have a nice summary to really poetically wrap up all the themes we've been talking about.
Right on. Go ahead.
Right. So, description of the Fool in the Thoth deck from the Book of Thoth is as follows. The design of the present card resumes the principal ideas of the above essays. The Fool is of the gold of air. He has the horns of Dionysus Zagreus, and between them is the phallic cone of white light representing the influence from the crown upon him. He is shown against the background of air dawning from space, and his attitude is that of one bursting unexpectedly upon the world. He is clad in green according to the tradition of spring, but his shoes are of the phallic gold of the sun. In his right hand he bears the wand, tipped with a pyramid of white of the All Father. That's another reference to Catholicism. In his left hand, he bears the flaming pine cone of similar significance, but more definitely indicating a vegetable growth. and from his left shoulder hangs a bunch of purple grapes. Grapes represent fertility, sweetness, and the basis of ecstasy. The ecstasy is shown by the stem of the grapes developing into rainbow-hued spirals, the form of the universe. This suggests the threefold veil of the negative manifesting. By his intervention in divided light, upon this spiral whorl are the attributes of Godhead, the vulture of Ma'at, the dove of Venus, and the ivy sacred to his devotees. There is also the butterfly of many-colored air and the winged globe with its twin serpents, a symbol which is echoed by and fortified by the twin infants embracing on the middle spiral. Above them hangs the benediction of three flowers in one. Fawning upon him is the tiger, and beneath his feet in the Nile with its lotus stem crouches the crocodile. Presuming all his many forms and many colored images in the center of the figure, the focus of the microcosm is the radiant sun. The whole picture is a glyph of the creative light.
So, where did Aleister Crowley come up with these ideas of what you just read, those, three things that you have read? What formed his journey?
Right. Well, the Nile, the crocodile in the Nile was the crocodile that the baby Horprokrat was riding on. The go back, the pyramid of white, all the references to Kether, right? The green man of spring, and then some of it is a little deep. Like he is the one of the biggest mythology nerds that has ever lived. So I can't say exactly why the Caduceus is related to the fool or the above them hangs the benediction of three flowers in one. I'm not exactly sure what that's about, but fawning upon him is the tiger. That's what he just described Bacchus's journey through Asia with the tiger pouncing on him. But yeah, he combines so many different things, like the vulture of Mott. I'm not that familiar with Mott really. I can't say what the connection is there, but I'm sure there is one. The more I read
Yeah.
about other mythology and then go back to his work, the more I understand it.
Okay. Well, thank you. That
Of course.
deep description, and I don't own that deck. I don't know much about it. I know we've done a ton of reading on Aleister Crowley. I know his background. I'm getting to know it more and more, especially when we talked about it the other night. He is really an unusual character, and his whole life, and the fact that he did a tarot deck is quite significant. It's a big deal to make a deck. I mean, you may be like, well, not anymore. You can just do one with AI. Yeah, but even still, it still takes someone's imagination to feed it into AI, and I see it as a symbiotic relationship. And maybe the world will become a better place because we're taking more of a chance and we're being foolish and we're risking the ridicule. And
Yeah, I think his work
maybe there'll be
on
great
the
things that will
paper.
be changed because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I
What's
think his
that?
work on really underrated. Like as you can see, his work on the tarot, as much as we study it, even we don't understand every single reference he's making because he's studied so much more. He's just all over the different cultures, left and right, and that's what really attracted me to his work in the first place. Even when I didn't understand any of it, I thought that was really beautiful. That he can take so many different gods and goddesses from around the world to make the same point, and that was really my entrance into magic and the
Yeah.
esoteric side of things in the first place.
Well, it's said that he viewed the fool as the initiate in the great work of alchemy, I have in my notes, we didn't really talk about Aleister 1875 to 1947, but I have some things that you said in my notes. The Fool is a key to enlightenment. And his Thoth deck is based on Thelema, yeah? Thelema, Thelema, the religion that he...
There is some of his original ideas that he put into Thelema in the Thoth deck. There is some of that, but most of it is just Kabbalistic zodiacal traditional Golden Dawn associations with a few of his own tweaks.
Okay, so that's Remember, Aleister Crowley lived the same time these other cats lived, and they were all involved in the Golden Dawn together. And we actually talked about doing an episode on the Golden Dawn, so I'm looking forward to that whenever that happens. But so we can just put some semblance of order to when they met and who met who and what went down, because there was some fighting in the ranks, right? And disputes, and just like there always is.
What's wrong?
Always is. Thus the reason to be alone but not lonely. Okay, so initiated in the great work of alchemy, quote unquote, the green man and vines, life force, renewal, divine chaos, caduous, the merging of opposites, healing and spiritual wisdom, and the butterflies, the soul transformation and transcendent, like you said. Just to recap, he described the Fool as the spirit in search of experience, emphasizing ecstatic freedom and divine madness. Because really, this is why it can be really difficult for certain people, if there's been a lot of trauma, or your sense of being able to have a safe environment to create and go out and take risks and grow and be imaginative as a child. If that's damaged, then this can be really hard for you to be listening to this and be like, well, yeah, I'd like to go out on a journey, but like something holds you back. And I think that you're right where you're supposed to be at all times, really. And that it really is true that when the student's ready, the teacher appears, meaning I think doors will open and you'll know to take a different path. Because I took a different path when I walked away from a financial career. And it was almost a 20-year career. So that was 15 years ago, almost. And that was a big deal. Like it was me, the fool, literally going out on this journey. I see this card and it's like I had financial safety nets, and I reduced, and we made a lot of decisions when we just decided to move out of the city. But it was like I was this fool. And I remember seeing that card for the first time and him almost going off the cliff. And it's like, that's exactly how it felt. But what does it say? The longest limb or the highest limb has the sweetest berries. Something like that. The ones that nobody get, yeah, they're way out on the limb. They're way out there, but they're the ones nobody gets.
I've heard don't go for the low-hanging fruit.
That too, that's another way to say it. Go for the ones that are out there on the limb, and that's where the sweetness is. You see, it all is like tied into these sayings that we have, this archetype. Crowley's view, the Fool represents pure, undirected energy. He is the essence of spontaneity, the cosmic trickster, and the force of divine creation. So it really is the breath of life. The solar logos, the sun that's so heavy in this card, is Gnostic, esoteric and Gnostic traditions. The sun's closely linked to the concept of the solar logos, which represents divine intelligence or the word of God. The solar logos is seen as the guiding form of creation, the primordial energy behind all life. It's the cosmic force that imparts order and structure to the universe. This is what's driving him, this breath of which we just spoke, the force. It's the breath of life, like when it first arrives. It's potent, right? I mean,
It keeps making me think of the baby.
Thus, that's the birth of a child and how significant it is, right? And there's something to all this energy here, the deeper layers. We'll go into zero, why zero isn't considered a number. Do you know why that is? You probably do. But the Greeks never, Pythagoras never entertained, he only entered, well, the Greeks anyway, not other cultures, but the Greeks, where we get a lot of, our information passed down in ways of being. If you go back and it's tied into who we are, only did 1 to 9, so the common denominators. So 0 is, it's just like a baby born. It has no idea of its potential, but it's young and it just starts out. That's why you need the 22 cards, and this is the first one, because you have to set the stage of what you're about to do. And look before you leap. I don't know. He doesn't seem to be looking. He's just leaping. He is going to go off that edge. I mean, his eyes are closed in this card. And the dog's like, yeah, I see the dog jumping up. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's something more there. But was your guys in the Thoth, was he leaping on the cliff? He wasn't, was he?
I know the air is behind him and the background is air, but is there a cliff in the background?
Yeah, the fool in the Smith Waite, he is standing on a cliff.
No.
It's quite clear.
No,
Have you ever seen that card?
Yes, I have. No, he's not. There is no cliff in the background. There's only water because he's on the Nile with the crocodile.
Oh, okay, yes.
And you see the
Man, he
lotus
really,
your crowd
yeah,
coming out from on the Nile.
he really brought in some deep stuff. It's a shame the way that he passed on, alone, penniless. It's really tragic. It really is. I guess when you look at how the fool comes in, what does he have? A flower in a knapsack, a small little bag. I don't see much else going on. He might have things in those pockets on that dress, but not a lot. Suggesting, don't get too tied down. This is just a journey. Like I said, you're coming out on stage. Don't take it too seriously. Don't get all involved. Don't get a lot of things that are going to weigh you down that you have to take care of. Like there's this whole carefree thing that we need to remember with the fool that he's trying to bring out in this card, I think. But there were other people who were of that esoteric and occult time that I have here, but I'm not going to go into them all. But look at Manny P. Hall. He's one of them. The Secret Teachings of All the Ages. Paul Foster Case, The Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages, 1884 to 1954, and then Hall was 1901 to 1990. And then the Fool in the larger esoteric world of alchemy, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, numerology, he shows up everywhere, and all of those combined make up the card and the whole tarot. It's alchemy, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and numerology. It's all those layers of all those sciences.
And it was really the Golden Dawn, occultists leading up to the Golden Dawn for the past century or two before them that really developed all of these attributions. If you go back
Yes.
to the traditional Jewish Kabbalah, there was no structure on the Tree of Life. They have the Sefer Yetzirah and the Sefer Zohar, and pretty much you had to figure out everything from that. The modern Tree of Life and all the associations of the Hebrew letters and the planets and the zodiac, that is really more of, some of them were actually Christian. Some Christians and occultists really developed this through the 1700s and the 1800s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have all the forerunners, I'd just like to say, to thank for all their work and all their various avatars in shapes and sizes and places that they showed up. I mean, I'm fascinated. I'll run across people that wrote things and I'll be like, wow, to have known this person would have been pretty cool. You know, like a lot of them lived a very magical life. And yeah, it was pushed to the limits at times. It was the excess that sometimes great things came forth from that. And unfortunately, if you live in that excess, you're not going to make it on Saturn, on Earth. It's just not the way it works here, you know. And thus, a lot of these people check out early. We look at the musicians who played the Fool, Jim Morrison of the Doors. Oh my goodness, absolutely played the Fool. Look at Amy Winehouse. I don't know if you know these people. Jim
Yeah.
Morrison, you might. But Amy Winehouse, just spectacular artist, but just couldn't kick the addictive drugs. And just other artists that, you know, we lose.
Yeah.
Janis Joplin. I
I
mean,
mean,
these were, if
mm,
anybody was a fool, look at Janis Joplin. She is the pure, she did, oh my. I wonder if she was an Aquarian. Wouldn't that be something? But go ahead.
I mean, even Crowley, with all his wisdom, if you don't make the right decisions and control your emotions and all that, you can still end up penniless with a cocaine addiction in public housing when you're 80 years old when you die.
Well, you know, think of the kind of person it does take to go out on this journey and the decisions that you have to make and what you have to let go of. And depending on when you choose to do that in your life is depending on what you have to let go of. Some people aren't able to do it, but you're letting go of something and and you're starting something brand new.
New life. Cool. Great.
So let's just talk for a moment about the symbolism on the card of the Smith Waite real quick. And we have this knapsack that's on a pole and it's thrown over his shoulder or her shoulder. It's like a small bag. And it typically like contains just a few belongings. It's not very big. So the meaning of this, I think, symbolizes experiences. Like think of this little bag, skills and wisdom that the fool carries with him, but in a very minimalistic way. The contents of the knapsack suggest that the fool is ready for a journey, but is not weighed down by material possessions. It implies that even though the fool is stepping into the unknown, they still carry the essential tools for their journey, wisdom, experiences, or talents that will reveal themselves along the way. And I see that little knapsack as your history and the wisdom that you've collected and that which you know. And it's imperative that you don't forget that on your journey. You know, you take it with you. And sometimes, especially those who've been wounded or hurt or abused, want to cast it off, all of it off, And I'm not saying put up with toxic relationships. But I'm saying remember that where you came from is important. Even if it was a place that wasn't peaceful, it still had meaning. It may not have felt good or been a good situation. It still contained meaning, and he's got that with him. I just think that that's how I see that, and I think it's really important. And then, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it made me think of how my relationship, my past is actually very similar. Like, I remember the lessons. I, I do my best to forget about the people and the scenarios. Like, I'm not the type of person that's gonna like, oh, let's go talk to my friends from high school or after 10 years, 20 years. Mostly because a lot of those memories were bad. I I don't dwell on them. I don't even remember most of them. I remember the lessons. That's why the knapsack is so small. But I don't really carry around the burden of many of those memories.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's exactly, I think, the message. That's really a great way to look at it. And air would look at it like that. If this were cancer or maybe even in earth, there'd be the bag would be much bigger.
Yeah.
You know, there's this is a requirement to go on the journey, is what he's saying here. Okay. And that cliff, you know, it's symbolizing the boundary between the known and the unknown. You know, not so much falling and harming oneself, but it's, to me, it's like a threshold between safety and the unknown. Like that place where you're like, this is probably, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. And you try the triple axle, or you ski down a mountain, or you get a canoe and start learning how to boat, or, whatever it is, right? It's all
That's a
represented in
very
that
good way.
bold step of uncertainty and trusting that the universe is going to support you, right?
Yes,
It's
that is a
faith.
great way.
And I think it suggests that sometimes to grow or to progress, we must step outside of our comfort zones and embrace risk and adventure. Because the Fool teaches us to trust the process, even when we can't see the whole picture. So, again, if you're one of these individuals that have to have everything all laid out before you can leap, it's not for you, because you'll have to be convinced to keep going the whole way. And it's like the partner, wanting to get flowers from your partner and you have to ask for them. It's just not the same thing. You just want to get them. That's probably a bad example.
That's a good
But anyway,
example. It
um
it's just to those people, a lot of that is about control. Like they can't stand the lack of control. And
yeah.
here's a loose, maybe, you know what? I would say this is connecting the dots, but not that loosely, because we keep talking about divine madness, and especially when we're talking about characters like Bacchus and Dionysus, we have to remember they were associated with the Eleusinian mysteries. They were one of the
Yes.
biggest gods revered during the Eleusinian mysteries. And what was happening during the Eleusinian mysteries? Now we have a pretty good idea that those rituals involved psychedelics. It's the irrationality that can bring you wisdom through psychedelics. Like, I used to be an atheist until I had a really big mushroom trip. And there are many things that happen on
Yeah.
those trips that, like, it's so hard to translate to words when you get back.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a logical thing, but it is truth. It is the way to happiness. It is the way out of this matrix. And coincidentally enough, people who have a really hard time letting go of control, specifically people with OCD, they are known to either be completely unaffected by psychedelics or highly, highly resistant. Make the connection.
Yeah, that's really, and yeah, that's really true. I've seen that in my studies in psychology, coming across behavioral disorders and certain disabilities. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I pulled Bacchus this evening. It shows up in the chart, and it is an asteroid of excess, addiction, an attempt to manage feelings in people and situations through substitution or avoidance. And there's a contact here with orchards, pine and fir trees, vineyards, and intoxication. So, you know, when you assume intoxication, this is some far out energy, right? It's in Pisces, in between Neptune in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, and we have Neptune in Pisces at 28 degrees and the North Node in Pisces in 28 degrees. So we have a stellium of Bacchus in the middle of all that Piscean energy, and it's in the sixth house of health and healing. And it gets along well with Pisces because it's Virgo's house. And there's communication there. So it's interesting that he would show up in the sixth house in the stellium of Neptune, which is what we're talking about. We're talking ether, right? We're talking God, like quote unquote, God-like energy, Pisces spiritual, above ether, above us. And there he shows up in the midst of the trio of North Node, Neptune, and Saturn in Pisces. Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
Because we're talking about bringing this energy out in a balanced way, but understanding that because you have to survive here, right? The fool doesn't take into consideration how he's going to do that. He doesn't have to have it all figured out, is what I'm saying. He doesn't. He can just trust and have faith because his head's kind of thrown back and his arms out and he's got a little white flower in his hand. Let's talk about the dog here for a minute. For me,
Before you move on to that, I mean, you just reminded me. I mean, we've all known a person that is just completely irresponsible. They don't plan out anything. They don't make the necessary preparations, but somehow everything just seems to work out for them.
that's Forrest Gump. That's the story of Forrest Gump. Remember? That's exactly what that is. You know, Forrest just finds himself in these really beneficial situations, and it doesn't make sense that he would be there, but he ends up being there. And it's this benevolent blessing. You're willing, you're gonna get golden boots, man. Right? Like there's a blessing there. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the dog, often seen in the full card. Is there a dog in your deck or a wolf?
No, no dog, just the tiger and the croc.
Well, the tiger definitely would represent, and the croc. Okay, well, to me, that dog represents loyalty, instincts, and companionship, meaning we need to bring that playful, instinctual nature with us. Like it can symbolize the fool's animal instincts or inner guidance, providing support during the journey. And that is protective energy. And we see often the dog is the protector. So there's like this dogs can be used to offer subtle warnings to you if cancer dogs or dogs that help with people who go into epileptic seizures or, therapy dogs, man. Like that's what that's about right there. You know, and he's going to be able to guide through that instinctual nature, that animal nature. And it's, I think, the inner child, that this is supposed to be playful. And this leads me right back again to not taking life so seriously, because dogs are so innocent, aren't they? You ever talk to a dog? Like the way they look at you?
Yeah.
Seriously, it's just hilarious. Like we have all these stories about our dog because it's like they just don't know. Like you can be like, oh, you're such a good dog, Lucy, and you're loving her and she's all wagging her tail. And you take her out and she eats cat poop, you know, and you're
Yeah.
just like, why are you returning to your own vomit? They do this too, like the dog returns to his own vomit. It's a proverb in the Old Testament, in the book of Proverbs. I think that there's something to this here. You want to say anything on the dog? Wolf.
Well, I would also say it's about physical senses, right? And of course, being in touch with your primal instincts. If the dog is such a good guardian because he can hear and smell the danger before you ever realize it's there.
Mhm. Well, we see something here in his left hand, and it's that white rose. And it's a symbol, white roses are symbols of purity, new beginnings, and spiritual growth. And it can indicate that the fool is embarking on a spiritual journey, moving towards personal transformation and enlightenment. That rose there ties into so much within the tarot. Its beauty, innocence, suggesting that the fool carries within him an open heart and a desire for growth and understanding, free from prejudice or fear. So it's such a hopeful white rose, you know? It's very esoteric
Yeah,
and
it does
alchemical.
remind me of the white crystal of Kether,
Yes.
spirituality, the new beginnings, and all that.
So like there's this lifted foot in some decks, and he's stepping and his back foot is lifting up. And that symbolizes like a leap of faith in the moment of action when you decide to move forward without knowing the outcome. Represents taking risks and trusting that the universe will support you. The raised foot also reflects the fool's readiness to begin his journey, supporting an openness to new experiences. So this requires, remember again, 11th house, first house. They sextile each other 60 degrees. Air and fire work together in the zodiac wheel. This is some independent power and personal power. And it is often the hermit or the one that goes out on his own. So yeah, I just think that it suggests an openness to new experiences, and a lot of, when I went and did research deeper on it, that came over again, and again, this lifting of the foot, just subtle little things about the card that you might miss. And then the clothing, what he chose, this is like a dress type, flowing type of tunic. And it's like there's a lot of creativity to it. There's a lot of freedom to it. There's a lot of individuality. It's bright, it's fancy. He's got a white collar, and underneath he's got a white shirt. White symbolizes purity, and if he's wearing that underneath, that says a lot. That this person is harmless at the end of the day. And I say, you know, how dare us harm? This is where we see this. Like there's an innocence here that isn't, at the end of the day, it should really be It should really be like we should sit back and go, wow, that person really dared. The person really dared to dream, to go after it. And it shouldn't, yeah, and it should inspire us. Right. And that's the whole thing about this card is you have to think about it backwards.
Or maybe it's just the way our culture sees things because we keep talking about innocence, but also we were just talking about the dog and the beneficial animalistic aspects of being in touch with your primal instincts and your physical senses, which is quite devilish. You know, it definitely more falls into the archetype of the devil. But of course, we keep seeing the white rose and the white crystal. But also, children are like that too, because children are innocent in a way, but also in another way, they are quite vicious to each other. Like they do act on their primal instincts. Like they are not considerate of other people. Like I'm sure you know psychologically it's been established children don't even have the ability to think what would it be like to be in someone else's shoes until they reach a certain age. And to me, those are the worst parts of our animalistic nature.
Yeah, I get you there. Perhaps it means more like signaling a fresh start in a clean state. It's like, because that's white. That's what white represents whenever we see it or we use it in magic. Like it's clean, it's unused, it's a beginning. Like if you do such a work, like there's just a piece of paper and then you draw on it. And if it's, the color paper matters. And it's this being free from past burdens that's represented too with white. So, I mean, his tunic is white, the dog is white, and he's carrying a white rose. And behind him is all these white capped mountains. And he's above these mountains, signifying he's conquered them. And the mountains are purple and blue underneath. And that's purple's spirituality and mystery and transformation. And it unveils the deeper truths. Again, this is the way to have a connection to higher consciousness and unveil the mystical truths is if you become the fool. If you care too much about this world and everything it has to offer, there's a cost to this, is what's being represented here. There is a cost. This isn't an easy path. Would you say?
Particularly as someone who has trouble having faith in anything, I would definitely say it is a difficult path.
I tell you what, some people were born for this. This is why we have people climb mountains and evil Knievels and Houdinis. Like, it all depends on the person, doesn't it? So, like, that's what I go back to. Maybe some people just being NPCs where they're never meant to go down this journey. They're just meant to stay. And,
Maybe.
they never awaken. But the staff that he's carrying the knapsack on, staffs represent strength. They represent personal power. It could be a wand. Wands are creative energies, right? Are fire. And he's got red flames again inside his sleeves that look like flames as he's walking because he's got this flowing outfit on with green and blue and yellow and red flowers. Like it's beautiful. It's quite fancy, like I said. He dressed up for the occasion, you know?
Also very effeminate, which we have mentioned. The fool definitely tends to be on the more feminine side, usually.
Yeah. He doesn't follow societal expectations or dress codes. Instead, he expresses himself authentically without concern for judgment. This points to the fool's nonconformity and willingness to embrace the uniqueness of his own path, unconstrained by the norms of society. I have that under his clothing. So this could be even, the fool was shown in antiquity in a homosexual way, in a bisexual way, in sexual ways. You'll have to watch that video. It's not just about that, but you can see how the fool shows up in many forms and in many ways. And if you look at Uranus, I'm going to read this quick. It's from Star Codes, Astro Oracle deck, Heather Roan Robbins. I do not own this information. Page 66. She says this on Uranus. Uranus acts like a cosmic clutch. It takes us out of one gear and after some chaos, shifts us into a new one. Uranus is the modern co-ruler of Aquarius and takes 84 years to round the zodiac. Uranus was the first planet we discovered once the telescope broke the boundary of our known solar system. So Uranus in this card in the Fool Aquarian represents going out of bounds where we haven't seen before and daring to go like Star Trek, boldly going where no man has gone before. Kind of represents that. And coincided with the Industrial Revolution, when many technical and cultural assumptions broke apart. It embodies difference and eccentricity as it rotates in the opposite direction of most other planets and at an approximate right angle to them with one pole pointing towards the sun. If you see this in a reading, surprise or be surprised, be ready to shift gears. It's time to experiment and try a fresh approach or new road entirely. If your life were a garden, now would be the time to scatter handfuls of diverse seeds, water them all, see what grows robustly, and weed the rest later. Urgent anxiety can be a symptom of Uranian restlessness. So rather than just flailing about, look for the root cause and ask what change would actually solve the problem. What looks like a disaster may bring a wild opportunity. If you are thrown a sudden or shocking change, assume that you are being tossed out of the nest into a potentially heroic journey. Chaos can be an important catalyst, an unnerving moment caught between forms. 0, 0. Remember? Nothing. 0, 0. The discomfort allows and propels you to transform. Become your most authentic, eccentric self. You are just what is needed. Uranus encourages technical upgrades and a cutting-edge approach, whether that means acquiring new equipment or new skills. So, evolutionary leap, shocking circumstances can force you. So, this could be that moment tying it to suddenness, and then I'll close with that. That moment where you know it comes, and you have this moment in history, and you can go, and you hesitate, or you go. It's that kind of moment where it's like, well, should I take that job in Nevada next to Susie? I'm in love with her. I want to live the rest of my life with her. Should I take it? Should I go? It's Good Will Hunting, one of the best movies ever, top 10. Good Will Hunting, when he decides, spoiler, he decides to go see about a girl. And it's that, I wrote a song about it, working on it, revising it. I sent that to you, Anthony. You know, that song called Susan, where all cost, I say in a line, has been tossed. Where sweet cost has been tossed. And that's what I did. I tossed security and everything I knew for years in the financial field and licenses that I worked really hard to obtain. And I just said, meaningless, meaningless. It is all meaningless. Like Ecclesiastes, Solomon, when he wrote it, that there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And this isn't it. This isn't it, what I'm doing. I know this isn't it. And I took this journey, and it's been wild. And I've made a lot of detours because I had to go down those other roads and the side roads. And I think that this is just the beginning of many roads that will open, but those other roads will never open, and those other opportunities will never open if you never take the first leap. So there's something to be said about that. What about the numbers? Thank you. What about the number 0? Anything else on the 0?
Yeah, I've got a little bit, and I would say, and to sum it up in my own words, we've been talking about opposites this whole time. Of all the contradictions you can find in the Fool, you can find both ends of the spectrum in the Fool. That is because the Fool equals 0, right? If you have 0 on one side of the equation, if you have +1 on the other side, you also have to have -1 to equal 0. If you have +2, on one side, you have to have -2 on that side if you want to equal 0. So here's how Crowley puts it. Oh, no, I read this before, actually. I did read this already.
Okay. Do you want to reiterate what it was, since you're talking about it, and tie it back in?
Sure. It says, the really important feature of this card is that its number should be 0. It represents therefore the negative of the tree of life, the source of all things. It is the Kabbalistic 0. It's the equation of the universe, the initial and final balance of the opposites. Air in this card, therefore quintessentially means a vacuum. Because it isn't anything.
Yeah. It's raw, pure potential. It's that child that has genetic disposition, again, and cultural impacts of ancestry, but it's still a blank slate. It's the white piece of paper yet to be drawn upon. It's the world's the oyster. What is it? The world's your oyster? Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about how studying this card can help your mental health too. And you're like, what? And for me, I have some really strong Virgo in my chart, and it can be very analytical and perfectionist and hard on itself. Virgo takes that energy and turns it in on itself at times, and with Mercury, it can just be overthinking and overheated and a little bit too much. But I saw in the Fool that, if it's pure raw potential and he's not stressed out, it's like, oh well, so what if I don't get this thing done today. It's like there's always tomorrow. Every day I'm walking off that edge. Every day is a journey. The Bible says his mercies are new every morning. We have great significance in the Nine of Swords card, right? Representing that just before dawn. Some look at it as the sun setting. Look at it as the sun rising. You know, it's that hope and that promise. And for me, it was releasing being hard on myself and like being like, oh, well, I didn't get to that today. So what? Did I have fun? You know, do I have good relationships? Am I not stressed out? You know, am I taking care of my obligations, whatever those are? You know, am I on, you know, staying on the path of my goals that I have? Like, just not expecting this perfectionism and that mistakes are natural, you know, and it just really encourages self-compassion. Okay. So just being more easy that way. And then, you know, really cultivating joy. I saw that humor and play disrupts cycles of anxiety and depression because it's just focused to the present moment, to the now. And that is mindfulness, being in the now, being in the present moment, and creating, because that's the only place you can create. Do you see that layer of, it's like now's the moment in the Fool? Like, this is where you can create, but you got to do this. You got to do all these things the Fool is asking you to do. It just challenged my rigid thinking and brought more flexibility and openness and thought. And it was very, very encouraging. I think that the masculine approach, there's a masculine, a feminine way that men would approach the energy in this card. And masculine energy may tackle mental health challenges through daring acts of defiance against self-limited beliefs. And they channel chaos through production, like hobbies, challenges, competitive environments, something they, you know, a hobby to find catharsis. Don't take life so seriously. Find a remedy and play. Find a channel that's easy and matches your energy and just go do that. And don't worry what other people think. Go for it. And the feminine approach is nurturing the inner child. It's not like this head on where the masculine does things. The feminine nurtures and deals with soothing and discovering and rediscovering joy and, I don't know, just an innocence to the aspects of the psyche that's more tender. Flow and surrender is seen. So maybe in your mental health, you need to flow and surrender more, meaning just go with the rhythms. This is one reason why I'm doing the moon circles and meeting with other women. We're doing moon circles. And it just allows me to really be in touch with these monthly cycles as we go through the wheel, as we go through the year. And it's like, wow, there's this rhythm and this language that comes out. And there's a purpose and a reason. And it brings you into the layers that are in his little bag there, and that what you carry with you of all the history, the folklore, the mythology, the truths behind, you know, why is elderberry assigned to this month? You know, why do we use rose quartz to heal? Like, where do all these stories come from? And it's all in that little pouch that he carries as a remembrance. And I think that that's really something the feminine is concerned about. She preserves. And I think that's important. So it really can help maintain our, in relationships, our authenticity, playfulness and vulnerability. You know, to remember in relationships to not let life be so hard. It breaks the tension, you know.
It does. And I'm glad we did this.
Well, I definitely think that this card can help with shadow work in the areas where perhaps you've been too hard on yourself or hard on others, or maybe where you're wanting to venture out and you just are afraid, which is natural. You know, think about the guy who jumps out of the parachute. He trains. He trains and he has everything prepared that he possibly can. But at the end of the day, he has to leap. He's got to leap. Take the leap. Be the fool. Be willing to fall. Just get back up and do it all over again because tomorrow's a new day. Full of pure, raw potential, baby. Oh, Anthony, you're so serious tonight.
I laugh.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I laugh.
Okay. Okay. Well, I didn't hear you. You need to laugh louder so I can hear you. I'm just kidding. Well, I have certainly played the fool this evening. I have stepped into no man's land, and at some point I shall be gone, but this recording shall remain. So whoever's listening to this, you're part of my brood, of my seed, of my great, great, great grandchild. You're Meemaw. Whoever I am related to you lived her life, and she took the risk, and it was worth it. Fail forward. Fail forward. Absolutely. But go forward. Keep going. That's all I have.
All right. Let's end
Jeff.
on a nice summary by Aleister Crowley.
Okay.
The fool is masculine and feminine, the savior and the devil. It has seemed convenient to deal separately with these main forms of the idea of the fool, but no attempt has been made or should be made to prevent the legends overlapping and coalescing. The variations of expression, even when contradictory in appearance, should lead to an intuitive apprehension of the symbol by a sublimation and transcendence of the intellectual. All these symbols of the trumps ultimately exist in a region beyond reason and above it. The study of these cards has for its most important aim the training of the mind to think clearly and coherently in this exalted manner. One must constantly keep in mind the bivalence of every symbol. Insistence upon either one or the other of the contradictory attributions inherent in a symbol is simply a mark of spiritual incapacity, and it is constantly happening because of prejudice. It is the simplest test of initiation that every symbol is understood instinctively to contain the contradictory meaning in itself. Mark well the passage in the Vision and the Voice, page 136. And for your context, the Vision and the Voice is Crowley's record of himself scrying throughout the Tree of Life. So from that, it says, "It is shown me that this heart is the heart that rejoiceth, and the serpent is the serpent of Thoth. For herein all the symbols are interchangeable, for each one containeth in itself its own opposite. And this is the great mystery of the supernals that are beyond the abyss. For below the abyss, contradiction is division, but above the abyss, contradiction is unity. and there could be nothing true except by virtue of the contradiction that is contained in itself. That is the fool.
In closing, I have a few quotes. William Shakespeare, a fool thinks himself to be wise, but a wise man knows himself to be a fool. Rumi, 13th century Persian mystic poet, be like a fool who is lost in love and keep yourself foolish. That fool is wiser than 100 so-called clever men. Friedrich Nietzsche, you must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. Mark Twain, let us be thankful for the fools, but for them, the rest of us could not succeed. Oscar Wilde, experience is merely the name men give to their mistakes. Alan Watts, philosopher and mystic, you are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. Joseph Campbell, mythologist and creator of the hero's journey, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Carl Jung, psychologist and mystic thinker, in all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Hafiz, 14th century Persian poet and mystic, stay with those who know the secret of always being a beginner. Bob Dylan, I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. So he is the wisest of fools and the most foolish of sages. He is chaotic, yet he moves in divine harmony. He leaps into the unknown and finds the hidden path. Good night.
Good night.